as opposed to artworks. They like these social projects that, especially with the Trinity session, which I know more about, and kind of setting up organizations and structures and initiatives that are, they're like, socially vibrant and aware, and so I think, I think students far too often don't actually realize that they are capable of initiating, these changes and their own kind of occupations and their own kind of, careers in the space, like with this skill set. Anyway, so I'm not going to go on because I can waffle for ages and also just talk for hours. But yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and really looking forward to hearing everything you have to share with us.
Awesome. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's always nice to share stories and see how one can, I guess, continue the collaboration that one has with people that are around. I think none of us as artists are solo agents. We're all part of an ecosystem and a system that has to support itself and others. And if we stop doing that, then I think we might as well stop making art, because I think the very dialogue of making shouldn't be about just servicing an industry, but actually creating a sense of connectedness. And I do need to mention this, Tracy, just for the sake of kickstarting an open conversation too, because I think everyone should feel comfortable that this is a space while I'm talking and I'm going to present some ideas. I also would like questions, and I would like a dialogue as we continue. You were studying before me at Wits, and I remembered, and I'm saying this with all the love of what you're doing. I think you were 2 years ahead of me or something like that. And I remember us saying, there's that Tracy, crazy Tracy who's doing this amazing work. And and the reason I'm saying that is because I think we all need a little bit of that edge to remind us that we are not just puppets in someone else's theater, but actually that we need to have the personality of being present in the everyday. And one of the things I always remember about you is being very present in the practice that you were doing, even at the time of your studies. And obviously you missed that because you just left the talk, and you're back, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So for all the students listening, I'm going to just repeat that about Tracy. Tracy, are you back? You missed what I just said about you. I'm giving away some of your secrets. So Tracy, what I was saying, seeing that you're back, is I don't know how much of that you caught, is that I remember you 2 years ahead of me, I think, at Wits, doing what you're doing, being active, being engaged in whichever way of your making. And I remember the acknowledgement in a very positive light of, look, there's that crazy Tracy who's doing things and got that passion going, which is something that you've never lost, and I think needs a lot of respect, of kind of taking the bull by the horns and actually just being a little bit of that which we all need to be, and that's slightly off tilter in the best possible way, in order to acknowledge the context that we're in, and that as artists we actually have to be part of the drive and the making and changing of our contexts. And you were already then at Wits in that strange wedge building, walking up and down the stairs. Remember having a conversation with you as well, going, well, yes, there's someone that's actually understands the need, not for playing the game of the artist, but actually being passionate about what one does. And I'm just saying that not as lip service, but I think it's a very important foundation to understand who we are in the practices that we lead as artists, and that at the end of the day we have a role to fulfill that goes beyond just making art, but actually marketing that which we believe in. And I kind of have been playing around with, and I'm going to share my screen a little bit. It's going to be messy today because I've got a lot of different presentations that I'm going to grab from. So bear with me. It's going to be a nice, messy, fun afternoon, where I kind of acknowledge the reality of us being in this metacrisis. I don't think we ever leave the metacrisis, and I'll explain the metacrisis later on, but that we as artists have this space of agency in the making and through the dialogues that we have. And because we are in a time of metacrisis. We have a sense of urgency and we acknowledge our vulnerability. So for me, this research has been a really interesting space in terms of my own work and what's happened over the last, let's say, 30 years, because this actually comes from a presentation I did about the last 30 years of South Africa and the role of art in the space that we've been in South Africa, is that by acknowledging our own vulnerability and being a collective space of production, we actually start to make something beyond ourselves. And that's, I think, a really, really important part. So I'm going to jump a little bit into some playful pictures of the past, and I'm going to talk a little bit about things. And the reason why I'm bringing up this particular slide is that for so long, at the moment, I don't know if you can read the heading, it says 30 Years South Africa Artist Dialogues at the Wits Museum. 2 days ago, I gave a presentation for the so-called celebration of South Africa's history at the World Museum, which is an ethnological museum here in Vienna, where they asked me to reflect on the artist's practice today, then and today. And I was pleasantly reminded by this book called Resistance Art South Africa, in South Africa, which you should all know, that talks about a particular time in South Africa. And I'm not only referring to the artists in this book, but there were many, many, many more artists doing radical things in resisting that status quo that you see in part of that slide, which is the picture from the Apartheid Museum of the old South African flag behind bars. And the value and the importance that the artist played in the role of contesting that which is, of questioning the spaces that we occupy as artists, not as only the galleries or the museum or the international art market, but actually saying what's happening in my backyard and how do I want to fix that, or how do I want to voice that, and how do I have an opinion about it, and what do I do to change that? And if you've got a common goal, like for example trying to get rid of apartheid or free Nelson Mandela or whatever that goal might be, then it's easy to target it because you've got one particular objective that you need to achieve as a community, because you know that is the big crux. Today we're living in a slightly more complex space. We're living in a space where the crises that are around us kind of circulate and generate new crises. We've got communication collapse using social media and all the other platforms that are giving you everything from lies to myths to damaging material to positive things. You can't discern anymore where the information is and who your common enemy is, or your common target is, or your common need to change something. And even in the climate crisis, it's all very nice and good that we want to save our planet because it's the only one we have. It's very complex to get your head around this larger picture. And it was very nice, philosopher called Rawson writes about this meta crisis, and he says, as artists, we are, not as artists, as human beings, we are lost in this, what he calls the meta crisis. But the way he defines meta crisis is to say, we have good things and we have bad things. And the crisis is not how do we deal with the bad things, but the crisis is how do you make sense of the combination of the good and the bad? How do you kind of look at the big picture and actually make sense of that which works and that which doesn't work? And that is where we're sitting at the moment, is that we're in this kind of conflict of realities. And why I'm saying this is that, again, coming back to the history of South Africa, we've entered a specific era and time with the new democracy, post-apartheid, which generated a sense of finding identity, of finding a sense of who we are on the international stage. And the international stage looked at us and suddenly said, you artists are great, let's pick you up because you've dealt with these issues and you're now finding each other and you're creating the so-called Rainbow Nation. But from this very beautiful picture that we've all seen, as I said, this was done for an audience here in Austria, where they were celebrating these 30 years. So I'm showing you some of these slides. It's quite nice to mix it up a bit with a new audience, especially South African audience. We know these images of power to the people, of the legacies of apartheid, of the complexities of a social structure, of the crime, of the fear, of the urban regeneration, of the xenophobia. I don't have to dwell on these things. The evidence of the past is everywhere, not only in the old signs of Europe, but in your everyday experience that you have, and the complexity that comes from this time, not only for those that lived in the time and saw the transition and experienced it, but for the born frees. You are not without any of this information. as following you around. And I think that shift of the very rigid grid of the city of Johannesburg, for example, versus the organic flow of people that needs to adapt to a new cultural system, the signage that changes, the reappropriation of spaces, the value systems that have changed, the new audiences that exist. These are quite radical moments, and these are all the pictures I'm showing you are all quite historic photographs of this kind of change of South Africa taken at the time, and then the development since then. And so all these kind of regeneration ideas and the transformation ideas come from a very complex need to, as artists, to enter into this new space of, we had a common enemy, and now what? Where do we go from here? How do we rebuild? What does rebuilding mean? And unfortunately, rebuilding doesn't necessarily just mean fighting the next battle, but it means shifting your attention from the angry artist that wants to change the system to someone that needs to start building a new ecosystem. And I'm showing you all this historic stuff because I think it's relevant today. I think we are in no different place today than we were then, not in terms of the power shift and dynamic, but because of the need to rebuild out of so many other crises that we're facing, good and bad, that we're trying to make sense of. And so I truly believe we're kind of in these cyclical spaces. And with that, I want to introduce to you something called the Trinity Session, which was founded in the year 2000, when all the cultural budgets were cut in South Africa. We literally faced a crisis in the arts industry where galleries had to close down, museums were incapable of actually keeping their doors open. I think the State Theatre closed down for about 9 months at the time. There was this absolute devastation of a landscape in terms of the cultural, economic possibilities, and the few private galleries that existed kind of cheated along, selling some kind of art that the international market wanted to have. And there were some critical questions to be asked about, well, how does this art market and art system really work in a space and in a system where art is really an imposed notion on the continent? And this is a really important question that even today is still relevant. We practice art, we build our audiences, we develop things, but how it's perceived, how it's bought, how it's consumed is still very much about an outside point of view, saying, oh, biennial, oh, the art fair, oh, this international New York gallery, oh, this space that you should go to because that's where the money lies. And there's very little attention focused inwards. Of course, we've got our local art fairs, and we've got we had a biennial that was short-lived, but nevertheless, there was an attempt. And I know we're building our own systems, but very often, as artists, we get taught to service those that basically want to use us for the benefit of their own economic or idealistic and agendas. And so the year 2000 was no different. Where do you turn when your budgets are cut? Where do you turn when the notion of art, the way you value it, because you got taught in that Western style, you suddenly have to sit and go, now what do I do with this painting that I've made? Where do I put it? How do I engage with the audience if I have no gallery? What do I do? Became a really interesting critical question for Stephen Bronwyn. Oh, sorry, I'm speaking of Bronwyn now, my partner at the moment. Stephen, Catherine Smith, Joseph Herrera, and myself saying, what can we do to try and create a collective space for sharing? So you see Stephen, Catherine, myself in the top left-hand corner, they're being all happy and ready to go. I still had hair then, 2001, quite exciting. But the whole point was, how do we tackle this crisis that we see happening around us? And what was exciting about the moment for us is that we all just brought our own networks. So Stephen was very much working at the Market Theatre Galleries. He ran the gallery there from '94. So he really hosted and presented some really radical work at the Market Theatre Gallery as the curator, but also his interest was the urban environment and the urban transformation. Catherine was very much in the space of the academia and writing and text and other types of research that interested at the time around forensics, etc., which is now pursued in other ways. And mine was in the electronic and digital space. So we brought together our networks from different spaces. So my focus around media art, was I built a network called Sandman. It was the Southern African New Media Art Network, because I realized my interest being in the technological space is that there were very few platforms to showcase electronic work and to motivate electronic work. And so I brought that angle into the mix, where I collaborated with the Vodacoms and whatever it was at the time, to see how art and technology can work together. And so I brought that angle. Catherine, her journalistic and research-based stuff from the academic side, and Stephen from the urban side. And we said, let's share a studio and let's see what happens if we don't tell anyone what we do, but we just do it. And I'm very proud to say, and this is not just to say, rah, rah, Marcus, we went through a lot of difficult times and it's been very, very complex. And there's a lot of criticism that I give myself on some of the things that we've done. I'd love to discuss some of these ideas, the failings of some of the things too. But what has been a very successful journey is that Stephen and I are still as partners and collaborators running the program. Pre-COVID, we were doing exceptionally well with a big team of permanent staff that were really taking on large projects and seeing how we can create an alternative part to the industry. I'd like to give you a glimpse into the thinking behind this, because it came out of the space of need and it developed something that we're very proud of. It's not a model to copy and paste, but rather something that you can maybe learn from, and we can have a conversation about that when your questions come up. But for now, yeah, let's jump into what we did or why we did it. So it was very interesting because we never said what we do, and we just called ourselves the Trinity Sessions and started to do little projects here and there. People started to say, what are you? Who are you? Are you a collective? Are you an agency? What do you do? And it was so nice not to tell people what we do, but rather allow the projects to speak for themselves. And because we had such an open policy to what we're doing, we got all kinds of bizarre invitations and projects that emerged. And one of the things that was quite interesting is the International Labour Organization engaged local researchers in South Africa to do a study in the SADC region, so in the Southern African region, saying, how can you understand the art and crafts industry in the region? They did the same for film, for performance, etc. They had different categories, and they had different researchers doing the category. And apparently some clipboard researcher, like literally went with a clipboard from one place to the next in the SADC region and said, please tell me about the industry. And then they ticked little boxes and did their kind of usual form of research, and horribly failed in trying to get the essence of what the arts and crafts industry was all about, not realizing that you need the artists as the agents to do the research in the first place, because they speak the language of the local arts culture. You can't expect an artist to have a normal conversation with someone that's holding a clipboard in their hand and giving answers that are completely relevant or irrelevant to them. So we decided, well, we were approached to say, we're really struggling with this research team that we've got. We've got very little of the original budget left because they've spent all the money on clipboard research. Can you as artists come and kind of swoop in and see if you can make sense of these contexts? So for about a year, it was supposed to, I think, be a 2.5-year process or something. I think we had a year to do the research. We looked at the SADC region. We went to several of the countries, and we did obviously other kinds of research as well. And we kind of went into this context asking critical questions of how the arts and crafts industry work. And the model that we used then, funny enough, I can still apply today. And it's a really beautiful tool. It was a value chain developed by an urban thinker, an urbanist called Charles Landry. And Charles Landry speaks of the value chain as this chain of events that happens within the cultural industries, that if you can have each one of these, in this case 5, you can make it up with more if you put the spaces in between. But if you, let's say with these 5 steps, if you can fill these 5 steps of the value chain, this was in 2001, 2003. If you can fill these gaps of these value chains, then you have a successful industry. And that industry means that it will kind of circularly continue, and it is a kind of a barometer to see whether there's even an industry that works. It's not necessary to say this is the law, but it was definitely a nice way to get a feeling of it. So we use this value chain. So just to summarize it, we talk about beginnings, the craftspeople, the artists, the collaborators, the institutions, commissions. These are all things that start a creative process or start a project or start the activity. Then you've got the actual production itself, the place where something happens, the tools that you use, the materials that you use, the people that are doing it. That's all part of the production space. Even the funding and support sits there. Then you've got, in the third step, the circulation. which could be agents and managers and curators and decorators and institutions, vendors, etc. Remember what I said, you could also break these into smaller chunks. So these are just 5 big, broad steps. I mean, there are many sub-steps that you could add. But anyway, then it goes to the delivery mechanisms. How, as an artist, can I deliver something? What do I do? Where do I go? How does my information get out there, from the music festivals to the museums to postcards to social media isn't on that list because social media didn't exist at the time. It says something called internet there. But yeah, so what is the delivery mechanisms? What is the audience reception? So, who actually gives you feedback? How do they get it, and how do they give you feedback so that you can go back to point number 1? Be it critics, donation boxes, workshop feedback, symposia, conferences. Here again, we could have social media nowadays. Yeah, so how do you close the loop so that it informs the beginning again? And so that loop then continues, and the spiral evolves based on what's going on. And so what we did is we started to look at understanding the gaps. We said there's this whole mechanism that holds a process, that holds a spiral of an industry, and what market, what audience, what industry, etc., can fill these gaps. So you can very quickly do an exercise like this for yourself. This circular thing works for every individual artist as it does for an industry. You can understand what your value chain is in terms of delivering that which you do. And it doesn't have to be a product. It's not to say that because I have this painting, I need to take the painting through it. It could be a very personal way of how do you understand your own creative process, for example, or how do you understand your collaboration process? And funnily enough, I've applied this in many instances to understanding projects that we're going to be doing. So if you're facing a project that I want to do, for example, let's say an activist performance in a public square about whatever, xenophobia or whatever it might be, I then apply this kind of thinking, and I say, these are my different aspects that can make this project successful or not. And in doing so, I can identify the gaps. And so what we did at the time in 2001 to 2003 is we identified the gaps in the creative industry. I'm just going to mute someone who's...
Wait, how do you stop this?
Yes, how do you stop it? How do you mute it? I can't seem to get to my participants. Yeah, right. Okay, I've muted. Naledi, sorry, I'm going to mute you. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. So coming back to that, the gaps. So we were looking at the gaps, and we were saying, how can we start to fill those gaps with actions that we take? And I think this is a very important thing still today. I think about the role of the artist. Yeah, I know you are in good hands where Tracy's concerned around talking about an ecosystem of support, a territory in which you operate, looking at the local and the international at the same time, thinking about what impact you can make, etc. And I think to take that step, the thing a bit further, there is actually that very critical questions of, are we artists in the conventional sense, or do we need to redefine the notion of what an artist is within our own context and within the funding agencies and the partnerships and the audience and the clients that we have? Is it as much about providing a product or a performance or a statement, or are we starting to actually analyze our own systems? Are we part of that machine, and do we maybe have to have these multiple hats that for one moment we are, as I've got here on the slide, something that we discovered quite early on, a cultural systems analyst or a creative business practitioner, or are we just the artist that sits in the studio and makes? And these are decisions that you will decide to make in your own way, but I think it's about playing that game. And I specifically put up that slide on the left there of us playing Monopoly and Risk. I don't know if you know those board games, but those are 2 board games that we were invited to do a project in I think it was in Germany, in Berlin, for the Transmediale. And instead of doing a big fancy art-based project, we invited all the visitors to come and play games with us, especially the network that we wanted to speak to, and provoked a little bit through these mixture of these kind of world domination games and space and economic games, critical questions of who are we within this European context when we actually not even on this photograph at the bottom tip of the African continent, and how do you play this game in a clever way? And so it is a lot about remapping, relooking, mapping out your network. I mean, we do endless mind maps. So this is a mind map of Stephen's on the far right, where he's literally taking what we called at the time a pinball MO, or we still call it that. It's like a pinball. You know, you start with an idea and you bounce around, and your references just kind of knock around like you're playing pinball. That's how we operate as artists. We bounce from one opportunity to the next, and it generates new ideas, it generates new energy, and we take that energy with us to the next one. And we love making these kind of mind maps and taking it on. But it was also about remapping the territory that we're in. Living in Johannesburg, walking the streets of the inner city of Johannesburg, all downtimes of the day, and making sure that we understand what it is that we're confronted with and how we can document our own context. And not just when I say we, it's a community of practice. It's not me by myself. It's always a collaboration of multiple lenses facing me as well as my lens facing them. And that's always love this picture on the far left. As you can see by the technology, it's a way outdated picture, but it always reminds me of the lens that's looking at me while I'm looking back at it. And I think these are very important games to play, that we are not independent little artists who are geniuses and superstars that can just forever only have your perspective. I think that makes for a very selfish and very self-centered worldview, and has actually brought us to the demise of the world that we're currently in my opinion, as opposed to a very collective, reflective, and engaged pinball game that we have to play. And so with that, there have been many projects that evolved out of this thinking. Very quickly we noticed, and I'm just focusing now on the urban projects, but before I go there, I mean, we did some crazy things at the time, and I'm referencing it again now, not to give you just to learn from one or two references. Big Brother, for example, was a massive hit in South Africa. The first Big Brother was like 12 million people were glued to the TV watching Big Brother at the time, the reality show. It was one of the first reality shows that were actually happening in South Africa. And we immediately said, well, isn't that a platform to invade? Isn't that the space where we should put the contemporary art, to ask the question about what art can do in the space? And the best part of it is that in Big Brother 1, the couch that was in the Big Brother house, I think got auctioned off for about R500,000. I mean, phenomenal. How can a couch that is a non-item that some weirdos farted on now suddenly be sold for that amount of money? And we thought, well, if that's the case, can you imagine what art would go for if you put it in the Big Brother house? Let's try it. And so we drummed together as many artists as we could that had a contemporary twist on Big Brother. And we said, how can we invade the Big Brother house through artistic actions? And we partnered up with the foundation, the Topsy Foundation, who was going to be the charity that we worked with, because that was our way of getting into it. And we curated art into the Big Brother house purely out of a free will. This wasn't a paid job. It was us just saying, how do we invade? How do we play? How do we manipulate? And we had some really radical work in that space, everything from pictures of eyes to actual housemates making art. We got T-shirts made by different contemporary artists with slogans and things. We even had a shower mat as an artist, because we realized shower hour was always when people were watching the most, because they wanted to see a bit of skin, you know what I mean? And then by looking down in shower hour, they suddenly saw an artwork on the floor, you know, bizarre things like that. Completely crazy, completely fun, but it was our way of trying to invade a new space. And why I'm saying it, because it was one of our good projects, but also one of our failures, because what happened is we thought, great, now comes the end of, we invested all this time and energy into doing this, because we all work for nothing. We're artists, so we love what we do, so why should we get paid? So we just invested all of our energy into this, thinking we can make a change, but we had a financial model. And the financial model was that everyone part of this project would make a lot of money when the art gets auctioned at the end. So we got Endemol, who still is the big corporation that runs all of these reality shows, to agree to hosting an auction afterwards with the art in, I think it was in Monte Cassino of all places. I don't know why we went there, but that's where they wanted it. And they were going to bring all their rich clients and all of that. And we were going to, and some of the money, well, I think it was half the money was going to go to the charity, and the other half was going to go to the artists and the arts organization. And the way we calculated it is this would actually be a really lucrative project for everyone. Little did we know that the big monster Endemol doesn't give a shit about anyone but themselves, and they decided to pull the plug of the auction 2 days after the closing of Big Brother and 4 days before the auction. And they decided, no, we're not hosting an auction anymore. It didn't make sense for us to host it because we just didn't have the network at the time or the client base that would actually buy the work. So it was a bit depressing that we gave all the artists the work back and said, thank you. There was a publication that came of it, but it was, on the one hand, a real hype because we were able to talk about, we had a 5-minute insert at the beginning of the Big Brother house, talking about why contemporary art is important for today's society. And we reached, according to the readings, about 12 million people at that viewing. And at the same time, throughout the Big Brother journey, there was a ticker tape that would tell you the story of the artwork, etc., running at the bottom of the screen, elaborating on why the art was important. And so to do that was incredibly valuable. But financially, the business plan that we had failed horribly due to this big corporation, which we couldn't sue. We were trying, but it was ridiculous. So that's just to give you one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum, places like Faraday Medical Dental Center, which is now Faraday Taxi Rank and Muti Market, used to be this kind of context and was transformed through urban thinking in a completely new space. And we were part of working with local communities and artists in the area to think about how to relocate these traders through artistic interventions. And you can see below some of the thinking around remapping and playing. And I'm not going to go into each project. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of some slides of activities that were happening, at the time around promoting large-scale art in public space through a billboard campaign. I think it was the biggest gallery in the world at the time, with 30 odd, no, actually more. It was a 50 odd billboard artwork spread throughout the city as a large-scale statement, funded by Cell C at the time and the city of Joburg. But it was a major drive to get art out of the inside spaces into the public and people talking about it. There was a school that was started called the Creative Inner City Initiative, looking at how artists working in localized communities are completely disempowered because they don't know what to do with their skills. They can't apply them necessarily to change this. And we found out that there were thousands of artists living in the inner city of Johannesburg that just didn't know where to channel their creative practice. When I say artists, crafters, artists, creative thinkers, filmmakers, photographers, all kinds. And we realized just by finding avenues to channel this, it wasn't about teaching people how to make better art. It was about saying, how can you apply your art to empower your own economic ability and to change the society around you? And that became a fundamental question around the role of the artist in a lot of this. Obviously, storytelling, narratives, performance, public art installations, etc., are all part of that narrative. And one of those narratives was that as an arts organization, we ended up actually helping the city of Johannesburg write the public art policy that says up to 1% of all new development should include public art. And subsequently, there have been tenders that went out to support that policy. And we were quite fortunate that we won several of those tenders, and we were curating some of the art in the city. And it became really about allowing the artistic practice to come from the community to talk about how they see themselves and how their language can be how local audiences' languages can be facilitated by artists to make interventions of a permanent nature into space. Because the biggest issues that we had is that, for example, for the World Cup soccer, they spent 200 million rand repaving Hillbrow, and there was no creative ounce to be seen until we came along and said, wait a minute, we can replace all those benches that you've earmarked for however many thousands of rand each, and we can actually get artists to reinterpret those. And suddenly it became about telling stories on benches, or we can transform the parks that you currently have budgets for. Don't just go and spend the money randomly. Let's see how we can use the creative process of collecting information to change the urban context with the narrative and the stories that are local. And in that, how do we create these moments of peace? How do we create these moments of quiet, like here, Mantala, kind of meditating on these things, and Stephen doing this photo shoot with her was a fantastic set of images. This was just an experimental journey of contemplation in the city. But you see all these very colorful images of projects of participation, of engagement, of heritage sites being reinvented, of new forms of new voices coming through. Obviously, you've got the old guard. You've still got the importance of a very important international artist like William Kentridge having a big sculpture. But on the flip side, as important is then these Jutta Street trees that you see in the bottom, which stand still in Braamfontein. And the day we put them up, we were told that they would just get stolen. And this was actually one of the first public artworks put up in Johannesburg post 94. So it was the Faraday station that I spoke about earlier, and then these set of trees that were, it's standing in front of the kitchen. I believe the kitchen is closed. Anyway, these trees were an important moment in convincing the city to do something different. Why I want to just harp on the trees for a second was, we as artists were walking through the city every day. We were engaging in conversation. We realized this urban regeneration is going to happen. And we said, how can we intervene and who's going to pay for it? And we were part of research that was happening at the time in Johannesburg, talking about the cultural arc, connecting institutions that were talking about arts and culture on a bigger picture of Joburg. And we're saying, this is all very nice and good. You're talking about big, grand scale things, but who's making the small stuff? Who's making the stories? Who's making the statements? You can have Wits as an institution, and at the time it was JAG and a few others that were the main key, and Braamfontein and the bridge was being built, etc. These are the main arms, but who's doing the stuff in between? And so when Braamfontein was going to get an upgrade, we decided to walk the streets of Braamfontein together with crafters and artists from the Mbali Visual Literacy Group, and look at the street and understand the street and make sense of what it meant that this space was changing. We actually at the time had a studio and office in Braamfontein, and were operating from the gallery premises, which is a space that I'm not going to talk about today, but was another one of these initiative projects that we had in Braamfontein. That was an off space that we developed that evolved into something. And we were just up the road from this, and we were walking it every day, and we could see how the space was being abused in many ways. And I remember walking down Juta Street and having bottles thrown at me from some building above, because I was in the Mlungu walking down the street and I didn't belong there. And very quickly and very soon, this upgrade was going to happen. And we realized it's about trying to tell a different kind of story about this journey and this transformation of the space that isn't just going to be about another paving, but something else. And what was happening is that the architects were planning to have big planter boxes with trees in them, but as soon as the trees were being planted, they were being pulled out or destroyed. And they kind of realized that this was not going to be the solution, that these trees were going to suffer. And so within Mbali Visual Literacy Group, we looked at notions of trees and construction of some kind of plant life that wasn't really plant life. And because Pick It Up, the refuse removal company, is just around the corner there, we thought, great, let's use this concept as a hook. Then we can pick it up to fund it, because it's talking about recycled trees, or trees that are made of recycled material. And we did a workshop around recycled material, and I've got these beautiful maquettes of trees made of garbage, etc., that were being made. And then from that, one design style was selected, which was then selected by the city and by the architects and the urban planners. And we said, now Pick It Up will fund this. But unfortunately, they didn't. And the only money that we had was the money that the architects had set aside for the planters and the trees, which was very little. We almost made a loss on the project. Well, we didn't make any money on it, but the cost of the tree making was almost a loss. But what it made, though, there were 9 trees to start off with. We installed the trees, and then suddenly we realized that the car guards were wiping these trees clean. The city, the head of the Johannesburg Development Agency at the time, was an economist who was quite strict on her budget and wasn't interested in this art stuff, suddenly came up to these trees, looked at them, rattled them, whacked on them, making sure that they're stable enough, and said, I like this. This is going to go somewhere. I'll give you money to do more. And suddenly it grew into the forest that is now. I mean, I don't know how many trees there are now, but all along Juta Street, there are these trees that have been repainted and redone and repurposed in various ways. And it became a really interesting thing. And it was the first time that the media focused their attention on the art in the city. It's a gentle artwork. This doesn't say much about any political something. It doesn't change society in any way, but it was probably one of the most pivotal artworks post-94 for the city of Johannesburg, because it gave rise to people saying, actually, radio, TV, etc., came and said, actually, we need beautification. We need something that's not just about redoing a paving. And what grew out of that was this commission on, which at Wits so well, that's why I'm focusing on these, because it's in Braamfontein, this commission here, which was a short list of artworks, artists from that were selected by the Braamfontein Improvement District. And here the Eland that was commissioned eventually by Clive van der Berg, or his work was selected by the committee from the different submissions, was this nod to obviously the the land before us in the area, but also the reference to the importance of the eland as a symbolic creature in terms of the heritage of the San people, linking back to the origin center, etc., etc., etc. But what was interesting is, for example, here, because of the trees, there was a trust that something's going to happen when we build this thing. So this little futile attempt at putting up a few trees actually galvanized into this massive eland, which whether you like it or not, this is not a question of what it means as a sculptural artwork. I personally am fond of it, but for many reasons. But it's not about the role it plays in the moment for me in this talk of its value as an artwork. It's its value as the impact that it made on a citywide recognition of the importance of arts and culture. And this eland was erected and put up based on the support of the improvement district and the city. And the most amazing part was that because we were part of the commissioning agents on it, we were asked to help write the mayor's speech at the time, because the mayor didn't know what to say about public art. And in the speech, we acknowledged how important public art was and why it was important for the city and that we need more of it. And he actually said those things. And with that in hand, we could approach the city and say, look, we've proven that things work. The Johannesburg Development Agency has shown interest. The city, the Stephen Sachs office at the city, who was the head of arts and culture at the time, has shown interest. We need a public art policy. And then they started to develop the policy based on this. So just to explain the journey of how long these things take, this was a 7-year process or something like that to get from point A to point B, let's say. And so this journey that we take, and I'm just using this as an example, is really just the beginning of an unfolding and unpacking of different kind of work, whether it's in Vilakazi Street with these public commissions around the 76 uprisings and questions around it, where it was a very 2-year cathartic experience for artists to contemplate and make in response to the stories and the narratives. Some of the artists were actually part of the uprisings, others were too young to have experienced it, but had things to contribute. But it was a deep dive into the history and the understanding of the complexity, etc., and seeing how it can be integrated with the urban upgrade. And so you can see that as artists, we're starting to not just make creative pictures and creative interventions in space, but it's about deep-rooted research. And the artist as research is a really, really important role. The artist as facilitator is critical. You cannot get anybody else but an artist to access some people's emotional states. You need to use the skill of arts to actually get in there and twist the passion, twist the person's insides in terms of their emotive language, and pull out those narratives because they've been so deeply hidden for so long. So working on, for example, in Mamelodi on some of the really complex stories, in the top left-hand image is a crazy monument of a memorial that you walk through that is this very complex drawing of narratives that have come out of really deep-rooted research that only artistic intervention can facilitate. And so it was interesting to understand the role of the artist as a completely different being, and not conform to that which we all expect, and that's the picture on the wall, or the artist that makes the statement to the same audience over and over again, i.e. in the gallery or in a safe space. And I have to say my role, or when I say whoever was involved in the project, but in this case I'm speaking to, so my role in this is a very interesting and complex one, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, and maybe it could be a back and forth as well. Obviously, look, I'm a white male sitting in a context of privilege, at the same time trying to make sense of who I am in South Africa, why I am in South Africa, what my context is, being born and bred in Joburg and growing up on the streets there, and trying to figure out, why do I need to belong? And in the making of this work, it was, and I'm saying this very boldly right now to you because I think it's important to acknowledge that, it was as much about me as it was about the context. It was much about my own process of having dialogues, understanding my own role in it, facilitating, and I say it nicely, I don't mean this that I was creatively directing these pieces, but offering that which I know to others that had ideas, and actually working on a very fair exchange. You won't see any of our names on any of these works. This is not the intention here. This is not about building in a kind of a repertoire of labeled things. You also won't find much of this work on our website. This is not what this is about. It's about an understanding, a deep-rooted understanding of who you are in a context, and facilitating a work like this in Mamelodi, where we upgraded that whole Mamelodi area with the architects and the urban landscapers, and actually really engaging with many artists and community members in the space, to the point that we had people that had rates and tax issues come to us as artists and say, we don't know who else to speak to, but you guys are here and you seem to have a listening voice. Please, can you take our letter to the right office, because no one's listening to our issues around service delivery problems, etc. So it became a very politicized role to actually be in that space. And being an artist in that space means we being spoken to differently, and we were able to speak to people differently. And I think that's the magic of our role, I would say, and our sensitivity. I think maybe it's empathy. Actually, if I think about it, it's what we learn as artists, to be empathetic with our context. And I think that empathy is a very, very important part to play in socially engaged practice, and specifically in building new industry models, because you can only do that if you can acknowledge who your audience is. You can only do it if you can actually have a dialogue with people. I would have lots of examples to show you around contemporary interventions and art practices. So Stephen and I also collaborated as artists in a lot of things. So some of these projections you see here are actually our own projects that we did in Dakar and in different places. But why this slide is up is actually as a symbolic representation of the use of technology in the space. And I think technology today is completely different to what it was then. In 2018, we hosted a major international electronic arts symposium in Durban, which as artistic director, I brought together as much of the international network that I have to come to Durban. I think we had 300 artists and delegates kind of investing time and energy into showcasing and questioning what art and science and technology means within a context like Durban, and how it can or can't make a social impact. But technology, as we all know, from these wonderful devices that we all have to all the new things that we're learning in our context, as well as the old technologies that we mustn't forget, are tools that have been really valuable, and we can hop on that a bit later. But I think in all of that together, what's become really interesting and important to acknowledge is as I said before, the engagement with people, the acknowledgement of context and the sensitivity to the complexity of that context, and what the stories are that want to be told. Here I'm quoting on the slide an experience in Neustetter, which is a kind of township extension of Soweto. It's a township that is mainly a colored township that's very Afrikaans speaking, and that sits in a strange contrast to other parts of Soweto, because kind of offset and really at the edge, in the southern edge, to the mine dumps. And this mural that you see in the background of Mama Klava, who was a leader in the community from a religious point of view many years ago. She was also an avid gardener and a very passionate person about nature. And suddenly, when we started to work in Neustetter, so Lavinia, who is standing here in the middle, is one of our team, or was one of our teams. There she is. She started off in Neustetter with us, facilitating some workshops. Oh no, actually, she started off holding a ladder. So one day we were doing a mural in Neustetter as part of an urban upgrade project, and Lavinia was coming to hold the ladder. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because this talks about agency. And she said, "Look, I'm looking for a job. I'm creative, but I'm not an artist. But I can do different things. And it's about the ability to acknowledge that doing different things and being creative is already enough of a prerequisite to engage someone creatively." It basically became about her jumping into a project by starting off holding a ladder, then next thing fixing some of the mural mistakes, next thing painting her own mural, and eventually running a whole team that you see there, a fully self-developed little industry that happened out of this intervention. What happened subsequently during the pandemic, when we were very disconnected and not being able to work in these ways anymore, we did a whole greening project, and Lavinia ended up teaching herself to grow things in her backyard, following the culture of Mama Klava, and she infected many people in the area in a positive way, not in a COVID way, with the passion of growing and greening. And she eventually went on to completely transforming a a dump site into a greening program and taking that the next step further. And this is maybe that the next step in the journey is to say, you know, while urban development and urban plans and all of that are nice and good, and post-pandemic there's a completely different economic bracket again, and we're in this crisis moment where everything that we built up in these public art processes and programs is kind of collapsed a little bit and isn't as fluid and organized. I mean, we really tried to push an industry, not just for ourselves. I mean, it became a real drive. And honestly, between, I think in 2010, with the World Cup time, there was so much money invested in urban regeneration and public art that I think we almost had more money than the National Arts Council that year. I mean, it was a crazy amount of money that was being spent on public interventions in public art, and a lot of people benefited from it, and different organizations and different partners and different people. So it's not just us, it was a big machine of different people connecting and producing. And I think that's what's really important to acknowledge, is that one goes through these ebbs and flows of industry, and it's about understanding where we're at. And right now, even already a bit before the pandemic, but definitely during the pandemic and post-pandemic, the awareness of psychological and health-based questions is very, very important. You know, the artist as being a creative healer of some sort through engaging with the natural environment, to creating conditions that are talking about our environment, are very, very important. And it's not to say we all have to now make green art and grow things, but it's about saying what is the comparison between the nature system and the value chain that I spoke about earlier. And that is, for me, the cultural ecosystem, which I'm sure you've tackled quite a lot with Tracy, around understanding what does it mean to understand an ecosystem per se, and how is an ecosystem very localized and specific, and yet have some global terms and concepts that kind of make complex relationships work with each other. And how do you feed it, how do you engage it, etc. And we're noticing that the more we're engaging with mycologists and people that work, environmental activists, etc., that work with the understanding of the natural system, that maybe our general problem in the world, and this is a research at the moment that's really interesting, is we're too busy dealing with the world as a machine rather than an organism. There's this incredible thought that maybe the next AI, or maybe the next Tesla, or whatever it is, will come up with the solution that we need to save our planet or to save our environment. You know, maybe there's that magic pill that we all take, and we're really relying on science to do that for us, and technology to solve it. But it's actually within the evolutionary biologists, it's within the natural sciences, it's within the artists, it's within those that work with life forms in different ways. I believe we actually have something that we can engage that is not as rigid as the grid of the city of Johannesburg, for example, as rigid as the systems that have been put in place, as rigid as the ecosystem, the value chain that I showed you earlier. Because I think the value chain works in multiple levels. And this is what's been a really interesting thing, is to talk about other values. What are the other values that we have other than obviously our own? You know, I want to be an artist, I want to be out there, I want to be successful, I have an ego. But then there's another side to that. You can have an ego as much as you want. At the end of the day, you are part of a larger system. And I believe it is your responsibility as an artist in any capacity to think about how your actions develop an industry. We've been there, we've looked at the value chain, and you fill the role there. But at the same time, what's happened in acknowledging that in South Africa, for example, we just don't have enough people supporting the arts. We just don't have the rich patrons buying art all the time, so that even when you're successful, you can just live off the sale of your work, or you get remunerated properly for what you do, or you get remunerated at all. You know, we just don't have that same level of Western, and not always that way, but money that obviously comes from a very difficult colonial past. We know where our money has gone for many years. So how do we think of a different kind of awareness of how we become important? And I've mentioned a few examples up until now to say we have roles that we can fill that help us make sense of that awareness. And so building awareness becomes a natural part of what we do all the time. I'm trying to share what I've experienced so that hopefully you can take some of it, criticize some of it, make it your own, and throw it back at me so that I can learn more, etc., etc. And so we're creating awareness amongst ourselves, which is very important within the industry. But then every moment I get to have a conversation about art at a dinner table or at a bus stop or whatever the case might be, I don't talk about my highbrow notion of art, but I actually start thinking about, well, how does this thing affect you? How does my feeling vulnerable help you? What is that interaction? What is the quality that I have as an artist have to make you aware that I'm actually important in your world? Because I don't think making people aware of buying art is going to necessarily change the way that they interact with the creative sector at all. Sure, if you get a few wealthy people to buy more art, we make a bit more money and it's all great. We can make this industry work further. But I'm worried that we're creating the wrong industry channel, because we're just perpetuating that same financial model and not necessarily one that breaks the mold of what art is really good for in society, in my opinion, which is the next level, which is the social impact. I've given you some examples. How can the social impact really take us forward? Who am I? Coming back to the very personal thing. Who am I in my society? Who am I in my neighborhood? Who am I in my family? Who am I in my relationship? And what is it that my creative practice can actually change? And how can I quite bluntly commodify that if I need to go back to the industry development? So if I am good at talking to people and doing research and getting people to tell their stories, then why am I not being employed as a social researcher before people build big urban upgrades and put another stupid what do I know, a library where it's not supposed to be, because the people, they don't actually want a library, they want something else, or build another park without play equipment or whatever it is. So how can I, in my social research, inform the people that are coming into my neighborhood and into my context by making that research and making the mock-ups of what we want in our context and what kind of impact can that make? So those are kind of new value systems that have crept through. And these might all be very obvious to some of you because you do that in your practice possibly, or because you've experienced it before. But we don't do it self-consciously very often. We don't break it down like this to say, actually, I do serve a role in each one of these things. I've mentioned the ego in all of this, the personal growth. Every interaction that one has to, in my opinion, take cognition of the fact that it is important for me too. Right now, my talking to you seems random. I'm looking at a screen, I'm seeing myself. I don't even see you guys anymore because there's just a list of names that I can't make sense of. But just reflecting on these slides with a new audience, I must say I benefit too. I question what I'm saying. I try to say things differently. I realize I'm saying things wrong. You know, and it's a weird self-reflection that camera lens looks at you nowadays with all the technology, that you actually recognize yourself and go, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually different to what I thought. That's one personal growth. The other personal growth is the moment you do something for someone else, you benefit. It's a kind of a strange utopian notion that, you know, you're paying it forward, you get back what you give, all of that kind of thing. And maybe it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but I can guarantee you that as the industry develops, you know, whether I make money off whatever project right now because I've invested into someone else, at somewhere along the line, that the growth of the awareness, the growth of the social impact, and the growth of the industry development does impact you personally and your growth as well. So it's about seeing that big picture. That's very nice and good to talk about the big picture when you're standing in the middle going, you know, I'm making art and I'm hungry. You know, how is that personal growth for me if I can't get beyond tomorrow to get to that future point? I'm completely aware of that, but you know, often enough have I been in a situation where I've struggled with the notions of reality that you know, the crises I've been through personally, but it helps to zoom out and create that mind map that I showed you earlier of all the networks and people that are around you, to actually see that you are growing that mind map, that you're growing that network in one form or another. And that can be as simple as through your neighborhood, through friends, through an awareness, through your social media, and you start kind of expanding that field, which is in itself is personal growth. And the last one in this slide, which is the pioneering and visioning, I think, especially in our times of crisis, it's, as I said, there's always a crisis. It's just how you see it. But what we really have is skills that we learn through our peers, through our networks, through our lecturers, through our experiences in different cultural fields, is that we have the ability to visualize and vision for those that cannot. And just doing that, alone being sci-fi deep thinkers, you know, in terms of that you're able to put this and this together to make something new, means that you're pioneering. You might not be pioneering in the way that you think of an entrepreneur making money suddenly off something, but it's about not placing necessarily a financial model to it yet, and actually just acknowledging that what you have is something tangible. And with that, I want to just acknowledge that when we started the Trinity session, we didn't start an NGO. We didn't start a Section 21 company, not for profit. We started a business. We said, we need to be taken seriously. We don't want to be that begging bowl. We don't want to have to go around and say, please, please, can we? I mean, I counted at one point, I think there were 160 Save the Rhino NGOs at some point. If you just calculate how much money it takes for the administration of 160 NGOs, and they couldn't save the rhino. You know what I mean? Yes, we've got a few more rhinos now, but it's not like they made that much an impact at the time. This was many years ago. And I was looking at this model and I was thinking, you know, we spend a lot of time creating in the cultural industry that attitude of I need because I get told and taught how to ask for money because I'm considered lesser. And it happens every day. I spend more time convincing people that I'm worth something than actually making art. And that is a problem because it means that you start to second guess your own value. And that's where that last point of saying, actually, no, I'm pioneering, I'm visioning, and you in the room with me are actually benefiting from my pioneering and visioning. I don't have to be a bastard about it or an ego about it, but I need to stand my ground and say, I'm actually worth something. And with that worth comes a financial remuneration or a trade exchange or whatever it is that you need in order to achieve that. And it's a very difficult thing to argue that when you've got someone sitting opposite you saying, well, I've only got 100 Rand to give you for this thing. You know, you need to find a way to stand your ground and actually make sure that the value is understood beyond just that which the person offers you. And yeah, that translation is often difficult, but yeah, without acknowledging that you're important in the role or coming to it with some self-importance, you'll never get beyond just the space that you're at. On that note, I mean, I've spent meetings in a boardroom where I don't call myself an artist at all. You know, I call myself a consultant, or I call myself an agent, or I'm a freelancer, or whatever. You know, just the word art, unfortunately, in some spaces has tainted the industry, has tainted the perception of the industry, and we are busy reinventing that. We're busy changing that. We're busy showing the professional sides of it, and I think that this is part of knowing where you're stepping into. You know, there's this notion of the lost artist that can't do what. That's fine. We need creative thinkers to be creative thinkers and not have to fit into suits. I'm not asking people to put on a suit and pretend they're someone else. But I think that even within your role as a creative crazy, which I hope we all are, you need to own that and say, if that's who I am, then you need to respect that space and actually treat me with that same respect. And I think that's something we suffer from because we very quickly cower down to the powers because of the financial implications, because we want something, because we're begging, as opposed to being professionals about it and saying, no, service for this, maybe. Anyway, I've got so many more slides and so many things to talk about. Where should we go from here? I can pick up on one or more points. I see it's been almost an hour of talking, or been an hour. We started just a bit after 2. Tracy, can you give me like a thumbs up if I'm still going in the right direction? It's good to get some feedback briefly after an hour of talking.
Oh my God, this is so awesome. This is so fantastic.
All right.
Yeah,
if anybody has
amazing.
Okay, if anybody has an issue, then just send Tracy a message on WhatsApp and say, Marcus must shut up, I want to say something. Otherwise, I can't see if there are any comments or anything. So you can then just send me a message or something, yeah? So should I just carry on?
Just carry on. Everybody just let me know if you got questions. All right, cool. Thanks.
I mean,
my WhatsApp on this group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
awesome.
So
thanks,
I'll just keep jumping. As I said, this was a presentation for someone else. I'm really enjoying representing it to you because I think it's just a different contextualizing of different focus points. There's a lot of art stuff that I could talk about at some point, but I'll show you a few more of these projects, which are feel-good community building projects, and I think they're just important gestures that we make in public space. This particular one, Voters of the Future, we were fortunate enough to be invited to tender on the upgrade of the public art program on the Donkin Reserve in Port Elizabeth, now Gqeberha. And the there was a Route 67 that was being planned, celebrating Nelson Mandela's 67 years of dedication, and there were 67 art interventions or interventions along that route that was all about upgrading the neighborhood. It took us so many years to get to this point of actually sitting at a table with engineers, architects, designers, urban thinkers, and the client, the Nelson Mandela Development Agency, and Dorel Sapere, who was at the time heading up this project, was bold enough to ask the artists first how we should go about this research process and the making. It was such a beautiful moment. Yes, they designed their urban furniture and their urban landscape and everything, but when it came to actually allowing us to think about the creative process of designing a journey and a route and telling stories, etc., it was beautiful to be in a room for the first time in a long time. And we had the same in the Johannesburg Development Agency in South Africa, in Johannesburg, where suddenly people were turning around after 15 years of practice saying, wait, there are experts in the room that have done this. Let them talk. Let them tell us how to do it. And it was a mind-blowing moment for me to have CEOs and consultants and everyone turn to you, engineers that would usually scoff at what you have to say, being told by the client to keep quiet because the artist has a position. And that's an empowering position that I've very rarely felt. And one of the places where I felt it was in PE. And I think a good reason for that is that we had the trust and the relationship built up over many years in Johannesburg of doing these activations. And it comes back to the ability to bite into something and not let go. It's this unbelievable dedication that we seem to have in the creative industry to go back to the same place over and over again and do more and go back there and not just let go of that space because someone told you it's not okay. It's about saying there is a value and a place, as long as it represents the right thing, it doesn't harm anyone, doesn't hurt anyone, you feel like you're building something, let's not let it go. And it's been a very frustrating point in moments where you get told, especially again, coming back to my identity, you get told, use something of the past. Your voice isn't valuable here. And I say, well, actually, I'm an artist. I play in creative spaces. I engage in different forms of communication. I'm coming to you from artist to artist to see how we can collaborate to actually change the space. I'm not trying to come with this sense of I have, you have not. How do we shape the collaborative practice? And how do I take my ego out of it? And I will show you later on a little project that was very meaningful to me that I don't share very often. But that is in this presentation that's changed my perception of myself too. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. In this moment, it was one of these moments where we're looking at the voters of the future, we're looking at the election queue photographs, and this massive flag, as you can see, a real symbol of maleness, was erected on the Donkin Reserve side. Everyone knows this is where we are. And down here, you see a tiny, I don't know if you can see it, I can't zoom in far enough, but there's a tiny sculpture of Nelson Mandela, and there's a kind of strange election queue standing there. It was all about the hype of Mandela's legacy, obviously Nelson Mandela Bay, and this was leading up to the question of the elections and the election queue, this design of this route that the incredible workplace architects designed, this representation of meandering your way up. You could either go straight up by stairs or meander your way along the queue, was a symbolic link that linked to the sculpture of Mandela at the top. And so the problem with this land, though, was it was really no man's land. The Donkin Reserve was actually never really a place to go when during the apartheid times. It was like a no-go space for people of color. And it was kind of contested and people were avoiding it. There was nothing special there. And so people didn't enjoy it as a leisurely space. And so the question is, well, how do we change that perception? How do we change it into a place of welcoming? And then one of the things was we weren't going to change every generation. Let's focus on a future generation that doesn't know all of the complexities of this particular space, but wants to be part of it because they need the space to be part of it because it's actually part of their urban fabric. And they do need to walk straight through to get from the one side of the city to the other, as opposed to walking around. So let's make their experience a pleasant one and not a negative one, and not one full of hatred and commemorative sculptures, but rather one of a future vision. And so the future vision here was this election queue. And so what we did is we invited about, I can't remember, it was maybe 8,000 or 5,000, I don't know, however many thousand kids to for school kids to join this queue and reconstruct the queue, recreate the photographs. Obviously, they were at school taught about all of this, and we made sure that the teachers were informed about what we're going to do so that they could prepare the kids for the notion of what voting means. And we had each child on a piece of paper make the most important cross that they could possibly make. And that is the one that you see now in yellow down there, and write their names next to it. So it's their vote that counts. And we've got them to sign the votes, which you don't do on a ballot. But in this case, it was important so that they can recognize themselves. Because what we did with each one of those pieces of paper is we stenciled them and we painted them onto the paving that runs all the way down this queue. So now you've got, well, this is 10 years later, these same kids voting. But in the journey of getting to that voting moment, I remember walking up and down this because I went to PE for about 6 years, very regularly on this project, and not just this one, but the bigger project. And I would regularly see, after we did this intervention, kids with their parents walking the queue and the kids showing them where their name was, or looking for their name, and then kind of wanting to see where their cross is on this queue. And I think this is a very important little gesture. It might not mean much in the bigger scheme of the world, but I think for those that were in that moment, just for me as an artist to say I was part of inspiring, hopefully, more people to go vote this year, is a nice gesture. You know, it's a nice concept. It's also something I think that that falls outside the bracket of whether that this is ever going to be repeatable or something that's going to make me famous. No, it's the moment of true participation and engagement on a bigger scale, where the dialogue is about something greater. And in contrast to, for example, smaller things, this is talking about world making. Mark Straw, who's a photographer who takes great pictures, joined us on this workshop we did with the school kids in Patterson Park in Joburg. And it was about a kind of playful activity of just what happens when you take some little figures that he brought and place them into nature and their relationship with nature. What happens if you allow people to make new worlds? World making is a very, very important thing for sense making. We create mini versions of ourselves that every time we put a pen to paper, we make a mark that represents us somehow as artists. We do something that is representing something that we are. But what if people that can't necessarily make those marks can also create these worlds? And we made it very easy by creating little people that you can recognize and then placing them into worlds and having them construct things. And here you can see the kind of fun interaction that started to happen with something very playful. And this child-led development question of how do you design spaces through youth interaction to make sure that they are the builders of the future becomes something very important. Playing and experimenting on scale is such an interesting thing. I've used it a lot in my own work in exploring things that I do. But knowing that someone is sitting under a big rock with a big plate in this weird world, your imagination goes wild. And I think that's one of the key elements that comes out of this space of play. And I think the space of play and mini worlds or world making is not new to anyone probably in terms of what you do as artists, but it's a refreshing, fresh take on perspective. So a lot of the misunderstandings, in my opinion, of the artistic process is that you cannot take the perspective of the artist when you're looking at the work. We can, because we are makers, and saying the outside audience, but give an outside audience a chance to make for a moment and reach a point of, not your point of success in terms of the way you make. You're trained artists that do this every day, and therefore you have a certain thing. But if you give someone else a glimpse of that, I guess you couldn't be a chocolatier selling chocolate if you don't let someone try your damn chocolate. Like, let someone get a taste of it. Again, it comes down to the same philosopher I spoke about earlier, Rawson, I forget his first name, anyway, who talks about something called tasting the pickle. He's saying in this metacrisis that I spoke about before, and that he kind of defined in some way, he's saying that in this metacrisis, we need to taste the pickle. We need to taste what kind of crisis it is. That's the only way that we can really orientate ourselves. So if you can't get a taste for it, you cannot make sense of it. And this text that he has actually, I think, titled Tasting the Pickle is all about the process that we go through, or the understanding philosophically of what it means to be within the crisis and to taste the different type of pickles that you're eating, and saying, oh, that one's sweet, that one's salty, whatever. And actually starting to define the crisis by what it tastes, not what you're reading, not what you're intellectualizing, but the feeling, the taste part. And that's, again, what we do. We illustrate, we create the flavors, and we ask people to taste what we make. And I think in that, we need to taste it too. So there's this argument, should we as artists feel hardship so we can make art about hardship? Yeah, can we have a perspective on a war that's happening in Israel and Palestine when we're sitting in South Africa with our own crises? All of these kind of weird notions of perspective and complexity. I would almost say, taking all of that away and saying, well, fundamentally, we're human beings dealing with various emotional states and crises on a regular basis. Gender, race, class systems, all of those things, yes, they are always there. There will always be basis for debates and communication and exchange, and there will always be points of tension. But there's another level at which we all as humans have a sense of tasting, feeling, and compassion and empathy that is necessary in order to make. And what I love about Tasting the Pickle is that it's a personal act that you're having. What you taste is your taste buds, but you're tasting the same pickle that someone else's is tasting. And so if we're all tasting the same thing, but it doesn't taste the same, or we're having the same bite, but it doesn't taste the same, it means we have to take our own approach to solving it. And I love that metaphor in terms of dealing with where we are in this complete chaos of time and space. I mean, we really are in a weird place. And sometimes I just think, I wish someone can offer me from their perspective something. And that's why I do go to exhibitions. That's why I do spend time with artists. That's why I personally invite artists into my studio to collaborate with me all the time. I'd say 90% of my work comes out of the collaborative space, because I believe that it's that exchange that allows for us to have empathy for each other and takes, again, this role of the ego out of the picture and allows for a sharing of what that taste could be to each other. And I think that's just an exciting way of dialoguing. Anyway, I don't know why I got stuck on it here, but I think this is an interesting picture of one of the, I think a young girl from a school that joined us decided to build this little scene asking about what's going to happen to this poor little mushroom, where mushrooms are very important elements in our lives. Anyway, the other part that I want to look at a little bit, I don't have too many slides about it. I've done many very large projects in, for example, Sutherland with the observatory, etc., around art and science. And I think it's worth picking up on something there. Tracy, do you want to say something? I just saw your camera come up.
Yeah, I got kicked out. I was just checking the WhatsApp group for answer.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's just uploading my phone. There was just 2 questions. Do you want to answer them towards the end? Maybe like we have like a half an hour Q&A. Because
we can do that.
do you want to roll, and I don't want to.
No, I mean, if you ask them, I might not answer them straight away, but I might get to the answer in my thing. So we might as well just fire them away, and then we can. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the one from Genevieve was, what are some of the ethical concerns with starting the Trinity session as a business rather than as an artist-run space or artist collective or NGO? And Zavoyo's got a question around the world making, but I think she will want to ask that directly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask it?
So I'm not sure what the question is. Yeah, Zavoyo, do you want to ask that question?
Oh, hi. It wasn't a question. Comment. I wanted to add on. It's unfortunate that it's not in Johannesburg because there is an exhibition going on where they explore this of world making, but under the umbrella of ecospheres. So they have various artists where they address the political concerns around climate change, the little worlds that they have made through their artworks and installations. I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Where?
I just thought about it.
Where's that show? Where is it?
It's in JCAF. It's in Forest Town, 1 Durris Road. It's taking place from May. They're still currently setting up at the moment. Then they'll start to send out ads to allow people to make a booking. It runs from May until the end of the year.
Brilliant. I'll come see it. Yes, thank you. That's great. Sounds exciting. Thank you for that. Was it? Yeah.
Welcome.
Maybe share it when you do get an invite. You just pass it on, but I'll have a look out for it. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. That's exactly the kind of great projects that'd be interesting to see in relation to this. It's actually interesting. The ethics question comes in various moments. So I'll kind of maybe meander in and out of it just now. I've got it noted. Thanks for that. It's a very good question. Ethics is always part of every single project that you ever do. And that's not just got to do with forming a company versus an NGO. But very specifically, I can say that because of forming a company, it doesn't mean you make more money. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you are now suddenly super wealthy and make anything more than an NGO. I can tell you that I know enough directors of NGOs that are doing exceptionally well, and they are rather have the ethical question of, are you really an NGO or are you doing this for your own practice? So it's a complex one. It's more about how you go about positioning yourself in relation to everyone and how honest you are in that process. For example, certain tenders we could never win if we were an NGO. They just would not be a reality. And if I count the, I think in the 25 years, the one thing that COVID allowed me to do is go back and actually think about what we've actually done and make myself feel better about myself, because I was quite depressed at one point. And the only way that I got to feel better is to be able to say the 10 people that we had employed, we were able to see through COVID, despite us now not having that group anymore because we just got completely bankrupted in the process. But the other one was that sitting and counting how many things you do. You know, when you update your CV or something, sometimes you need to do that because you feel like you're not successful, or the artwork doesn't see you, or whatever it might be. And then the first thing that you do is okay, I need to update my CV, and then you spend a little bit of time just putting a few things in the CV, and you feel better about yourself, and you go, okay, I'm not going to open Facebook again for a while because it just depresses me when I can't publish as much as other people do. And you start realizing that actually you need to take stock. And taking stock is a very important thing, because what you end up doing is taking stock not only of what you do, but actually the impact that you have. And I really am not saying this to toot a horn. This is an honest conversation with you about building an ecosystem for yourself and your network. But the thing that I did do during COVID is actually mind map and write out and list the impact that I personally have contributed to in the process of forming the Trinity session with Stephen, and the kind of work that we've done together. And having worked with 6,000 artists within 23 years is not a small task. It needs structure, it needs infrastructure, it needs support, it needs development. Over 500 projects done in public space. I mean, these are not small numbers. If you start mapping it out, map it out over 23 years and divide the numbers, it doesn't seem like that much. It's like when someone says to you, how much sex have you had, or whatever, and you start, I've had this much, and then you say, actually, if you add it up by a year, it's not that much. So it's that same kind of concept. It sounds like a huge number, but at the end of the day, when you look at the scale of the projects and what it is, you start understanding, okay, this is the infrastructure that it needs to support all of this drive, all of these elements. This is the form. And honestly, the format of a company, especially at that time, especially in the year 2001, was the only way of being able to actually do that. And what is really exciting is that we saw follow us in a positive way. A lot of companies that we've worked with at the time actually adopt the same creative model, which is the antithesis to what was happening in the NGO space. The NGO space became more professional. The NGO space became more administrative. The NGO space became more structured, which it needed to, obviously. And so this weird play between the two is always complex. And the ethical question is a very important one, because it's one that keeps you in check wherever you are. So I think integrity, ethics, all of these kind of big terms that we get to terms with as artists don't always make sense in the moment, because you think you're doing something right, and then suddenly you realize, ooh, I did something wrong. Or was that 100% how it should have been? Could I have done it different? Especially in a complex context, where like mishaps happen because you haven't considered something, or you're speaking the wrong language, or you're the wrong color, or whatever the case might be. There's always this question of how do you position yourself within the development of a country that is riddled by that complexity and that history. And so ethics forms a foundation of questioning. I cannot by myself engage in any collaboration or dialogue without considering the ethical implications of what I'm doing. I can't think about it all the time because it stifles me, because there's always something that's going to be an issue. There's always a problem of me lecturing you right now. I shouldn't be lecturing. We should be having a workshop. I was invited to give a talk, so I'm giving a talk. But essentially, the follow-up of this would actually be that we're sitting around the table throwing things at each other in order to make a new artwork. And that's, that you need to take the first step. So it's a very complex question. Thank you for it. Let's pick it up later on again. I want to actually see if it maybe picks up on some of the other examples coming. I hope it answered a little bit the question. So on the art meets science meets place, I just dropped this in as a reality check on collaborating with other disciplines. The scientific pursuit is such an interesting and complex one. As I said before, I've worked a lot with the observatory in Sutherland, for example, for 8 years. Bronwyn Lace and myself collaborated on building community domes with the forcibly removed people that used to be on the land where the observatory is, and telling stories about their own cultural heritage, and very complex layered things, while the scientists were watching and saying, oh, that is just folly, you're messing with our research. They consider the humanitarian acts not as important as the scientific process. Not all of them, I have to say. Many friends and collaborators feel differently, but at the time there was a tension between these disciplines. This tension has eased quite a lot. So this tension has let go. Over the last 10 years, we've seen a fluid move between art and science. There are more and more projects happening. There are more and more artists doing things, and there are more and more engagements where people borrow from both disciplines. What needs to be said, though, is there's a third component. I hear in this particular project, it was called Art Meets Science Meets Place, but it's actually Art Meets Science Meets People. That third component is how does the collaboration of art and science really impact the world around us? It's one thing me working with the neuroscientists to plug myself into a automatic drawing machine to draw what my brain thinks. That's a very insular and small world. It's a completely different thing if I open that up to a larger space and a larger thinking about collaborations in a completely new way. So here, for example, just walking through the Barkans Valley in Port Elizabeth, taking references from nature. There was a new footbridge that was to be designed, and different elements from nature was starting to be quoted to do this. I mean, there's nothing new about this way of working, but it's just an example of a creative space to engage the natural context. What is magical about that crossover is something where we sometimes struggle with as artists, because we are so caught in our own disciplines and taking our own art making too seriously, is that when you have to explain to a scientist whose brain is very differently geared to understanding the outcomes and the process, you start to make art in a very particular, I would say, not in a particular way, but with a different objective almost, because your communication changes. I can talk to you about making art and we can connect on various political, social, personal, emotional levels. But put an artist and a scientist into the mix. It's really exciting, because the conversation that you have becomes about manipulating systems, organizing yourself in relation to research, understanding the thesis in relation to what you're doing, thinking about the impact it has in experimental way of working. And I quite enjoy that juxtaposition, because it makes us rethink our practice. And I must say, some of the most exciting conversations I've had, and this goes all the way back to, I guess, the year 1993 or something, when the internet became so cool, was talking to hackers. Hackers have been really interesting inspiration for me in understanding what does it mean to manipulate a system? What does it mean to invade a space, work with it, use its code, manipulate its code, not for bad. Hackers aren't all bad and evil, but it's about system thinking and system manipulation. And so that crossover between these things raise new questions. And very often, and it's happened in every second public art, social art science projects I've done, is we go back to something that we have in common. And that again comes back to the lived experience of the human, asking questions not about our disciplines, but about our lived experience of who we are and where we come from. And everyone has a different iteration of that. And you don't judge it by the discipline, but rather by the human connectivity of everyone. And I think that's quite an important thing. I mean, we can maybe do that with each other, but even with one's own family, sometimes you can't connect in that way. But funnily enough, put yourself in a context with other-minded people and explore your context from different perspectives, and you try to find a common ground, and suddenly you realize, as different as you seem in the beginning, there is that common space. And I think this might be obvious to a lot of you, but that's where really our social glue happens, in my opinion. Just as a bit of fun, I'm not going to play the whole video, but I'll show you a little bit of that. The visual. Wow, this is loud. I don't know how to turn it softer. During COVID, just before COVID, we were going to set up a whole lot of what we call visualization studios, which were in the 9 major metropoles. We were going to set up studios to talk about our future cities and our future spaces. And it was with the South African Cities Network that we were doing this to say, how can we imagine our future? And the reason I want to show you this is because it actually became a really interesting case study for using the artist as visualization tools, call it that, lack of a better word right now. What again, a new task for artists. Now we've got public art as a really important component. We've got Big Brother art, whatever, and now we've got visualization art. Maybe there's another avenue of business that's possible here, and another avenue of generating a revenue for others. And so what we tried to do with the South African Cities Network was say, instead of again sending clipboarders out to find out what people like about their city and what they want to change, allow us to have studio sessions where people can come in and the artists become the sci-fi writers. The artists become the constructors of worlds. They can build models, they can draw, they can make, they can sing, they can do whatever they do to visualize that which the public wants to see in their future cities. Unfortunately, COVID came and the whole thing crashed because we couldn't build physical studios and we couldn't employ people to go to, or unemploy, but employ artists and get people to go to meet the artists. So we shifted it all online. And what was really exciting about that part was that we enabled. The studio is a series of multidisciplinary. Okay, let me just turn that volume down. So these multidisciplinary studio workshops basically happened online, where we had different people joining a journey that we took people on. So in other words, we opened their minds to. We actually played a fun game. We started off with as if we were a taxi, and we drove around on a Google map, picking them up from wherever they are in the city, and then created a drawing out of that map, and then used that map as the inspiration for the artist to start, and then started to talk about the problems in people's neighborhoods and how they felt and what it meant and what they want to change, etc. And then the artists live, while it was happening, the artists were working live in rendering what was being explained. So they were sitting, some of them on here, for example, in 3D programs, others with tape, others with carvings, others with building out of mud, whatever. We're building mini structures, and you could watch them do it while people were interacting with each other, telling, and we were guiding them through telling their stories about their city, how they feel. I mean, this is a beautiful analysis of city with looking at it as a body part. We spoke about the city as a monster. We spoke about cities in different ways. And so we created these visual journeys. And what was very interesting for me is not only obviously did a bunch of artists benefit financially from this because they got a chance to make art while we were doing research. And that was a really important notion, especially, as you know, during lockdown when there was so little money to be made. But it also created a completely new relationship to the studio. It kind of broke the boundary of being separate to the studio and actually inviting connectivity and transparency in the making. And you can see here by some of the layering and things, it actually generated real research. And what was so interesting about it, we then created these documents, which were analysis documents of the art that was being made, that then interpreted the artworks for the urban planners, etc., to say, okay, so people want this to happen there, or they're still afraid of that, or they well, whatever. There was different things. And here are just 4. I mean, these are just 4 summary videos. Oh, you can't play them at the same time. That's silly. All right. Yeah. So there's just each city. As I said, there were 9 of them. Then end up having different formats and outcomes. And yeah, it became a really interesting subject where urbanists and urban researchers were saying, well, how can we use this? Is this valuable? Is this another form of conceptual research that we can then use? And what does it mean in the different future plans to have this kind of information? I must say we've got a long way to go to really be able to take this and implement any of these ideas. And maybe they are being implemented, we don't know about it. But it did set an interesting precedent for forms of new kind of artist dialogue with research. Yeah? This was quite an interesting one that's running in the bottom right. So one of the exercises, for example, that we did, a very simple one, which maybe we should do a little Zoom session one day where we play, was we asked people to go and fetch objects from their environment and create a mini city in the foreground in Zoom, representing different elements that are important for their future city. And then people actually built using all kinds of random stuff that they could just find in their homes or in their wherever they were during COVID, to create these landscapes and then really interpret and think about what it means to live in that space. And we had everything from academics to street sweepers. I mean, the full gambit of people that were part of this program that participated on an equal basis, and we used the budgets to really support connection, technology, etc., which we would have used for renting spaces, etc. Anyway, so that gives you just another role of the artist in a completely different sphere. I mean, I continued with that, or it kind of came out of another project, which is a dialogue project called Imaginary Futures, which used the same model, which was basically inviting artists and audience to reflect on the pandemic and on their experience in the studio. It actually comes from a planetarium show. Let me quickly jump into that because there's also an interesting art-science relationship in terms of open space. This is now one of my personal projects, not a Trinity project, but actually one that I pursued in my own research and making. Here in Bloemfontein at the Naval Hill Planetarium, which used to be an observatory, I realized that the people living around Naval Hill don't necessarily understand what an observatory is. You know, the people living in and walking past this thing that have never been inside, that have never had the opportunity to be inside, that haven't been taught that this could be an interesting and important component of their life, and how they can learn from it. And so what we ended up doing is saying, how can we take ownership of an observatory to tell our stories, or as opposed to some Western notion of the Greek mythology of the stars. So what does it mean to actually take ownership of some of these buildings that represent a very particular perspective on our skies and invert them somehow? And so what we ended up doing is over 2 years, this was 2017, 2018, and 2019, actually 3 years, is create a series of planetarium shows where the planetarium itself became a place to journey and a place to play. Where, while projected on the ceiling, were these films that we made as a community together, from drawings to recordings to everything else. We also performed in the planetarium below, creating a dialogue between performance and film, and using our voices and our performative things. I'm not sure if you can hear the sound in the background. I'm not quite sure if it's sharing the sound. But it's became quite a layered take on what's happening in our world and what is our future question. And so these are just a few stills from the actual planetarium show itself. But why I'm showing you this is because we were going to have one more planetarium show in 2020. There you see some pictures of what the performances were like. But then unfortunately in 2020, with COVID, it was cancelled. And so we decided to make Zoom our planetarium. So we decided to make the online space our planetarium. And it was a really interesting shift for me in understanding engagement and participation and personal vulnerability in relation to co-production via this device. And so I ended up creating, much like now, Zoom sessions where you wouldn't be invisible, but actually visible. And we would have an interactive, playful encounter and play where we took up certain topics and explored them. And I do actually want to share the sound. Oopsie, it's just gone away. Let's just make sure we can share the sound. Right, I'm not sure if you will hear this. You can just, maybe someone can say yes or no. So here, for example, Ngolisile Bongwana and Tulisile Binda, who were wanting to share a space together, kind of on either side of the fence that separates them, with cameras on both sides, performing live. It's all live. It all happens live. So this is just a recording of our live sessions, while Mariette, the scientist from the observatory, is playing with some scientific games to create a rhythm. And these interactions become all about these multiple encounters and layers of encounters that you can see. And so you must just imagine 30 odd people at the same time, live on Zoom, making stuff based on a provocation and an idea. And I'm cutting between them and kind of trying to VJ and share, etc., the screen at different points. And so it became a journey that started in South Africa and has subsequently become a real global project, linking all corners of the world, where we allowed different topics to be addressed using creative, playful ways of expressing and engaging. Here's Shadow Puppets being made live. So, just obviously having set up the camera and playing with these things while watching what's happening on the screen, or hear a dance happening in relation to everything else. So very exciting experimentation that's happening, and obviously voice being broken up in different ways, so you can't always hear everything. Poetry being read, and just these layers and levels. Might not seem like anything new now, but at the time, it really made quite an impact on many. And people like, for example, Manzikazi here, who's singing. She lost her voice because she got COVID at one point. And this kind of project was a creative bedrock for her to refine the voice and practice her voice in relation to the collaboration with others. So she used it as a space to remain connected with those that are around. So what you're seeing is a form of experimentation that on the one hand is about engaging others, but on the other hand is very much about me trying to connect to a place that is so important to me, in a community that's so important to me, despite being far away. And so again, it's not to say that this is all about others, but it had to do with me too. Yeah, it's again my own vulnerability and questions. What was really beautiful is we invited the audience to be part of it. So in this point, I kind of almost asked people to please turn off their lights in their rooms. So wherever they were sitting, I said, please turn off your lights so that your room is dark, and bring in the light element so that the screen that we end up looking at is actually a dark screen with moments of light. And then there was this beautiful interaction and poetic moments of absolute, it was, heart-wrenching exchange of abstraction and voice and sound and narrative that blew me away. I actually was completely in tears most of these sessions, because it just became the most poetic engagement. So maybe one more example of around, and then I want to share something quite personal with you, but something that happened late last year. It has a little bit to do with, again, positioning oneself globally. There's this idea that that we need to reach out to be in international markets to work, and I guess it is true to a point, because that's where the budgets lie. Those are the people that still dictate what good or bad art is. Unfortunately, they are gatekeepers. They build big museums. Tracy, you'll echo this one day because you've said it before. They build big museums, and then therefore they have the control over what gets shown and what people get paid and how they get controlled. And I've fundamentally such an issue with that, because the notion of art is very much an imported notion in many parts of the world, where it's part of the same colonial drive of defining that which we need to adhere to. We need to adhere to a certain way of presenting ourselves. We need to adhere to a certain portraiture in representing our identities. We need to adhere to all kinds of things in order to satisfy an international art market. And when you come out of a context where there's no people standing for queues to get into museums or galleries, why make it in the first place? What is the drive? Sorry, I'm just letting my dog out. What is the drive to convince ourselves that this is the market that we need to address? So just before COVID, for various reasons, after my father passed away and my mother moved to Austria and a whole bunch of things happened, I relocated to Austria with my family, trying to set up an exchange between Europe and South Africa, because the Trinity session was running well. I had a very successful personal career lined up for 2020, 2021, 2022 as a kind of series of shows that were going to happen in Europe and in the USA, all of which was cancelled, obviously. And so we thought, let's take the step and see what happens when you look at the world from the perspective of those which we've denied for so long to be part of. And on the one hand, I'm devastated that COVID came and changed everything, but on the other hand, I'm also very, very happy that it made me remap my own space, because it acknowledged once again for me the futility, the absurdity of doing certain things. We spend so much time repeating the same pattern over and over again as artists. We're kind of reinventing the wheel all the time. Even as a business, the Trinity Session never did one thing twice. We always had to reinvent what we're doing. And when we got artists, we got business specialists to come and help us, because we weren't making enough money and we weren't managing. And we said, whoever, these business consultants, maybe you can help us. We showed them our business projects and what we're doing. And they said, oh, the big problem is you're always doing different things and you're always inventing the wheel again. You must just stick to one thing and do that well. So if people want paintings for their lounges, then you must give them paintings for the lounges. They just don't get it. They don't get that you have to adapt to the time. They don't get that you have to change. Every public artwork has to be different, because it is about that public. Every action that you take is about a true investigation into who you are. So you can't copy and paste things over and over again. And enough curators have come to me and said, but what is your style? Why can't I recognize you in a collection, because you've got so many different styles? And I go, well, actually, maybe you're not the right person for me, because I don't think a style is an optical one. A style is in your attitude. It's the way that the artwork speaks to people and makes people engage and feel. It's not, the old notion of it hangs on someone's wall and you can recognize it, and therefore it's good. I'm not a Jackson Pollock that will make the same thing over and over again just so that other people can recognize it's me. And I think that fundamental difference means that we spend a lot of energy and effort trying to find our own relevance in this art world that is not there for our relevance if you're making work out of or in that other space. And so coming here to Austria and relocating here for a while, and then being locked down and not knowing what to do. We landed 2 months before lockdown, and chaos struck. And then obviously having to make sense of what to do with this collapsing infrastructure that we started to build. It's not collapsing, changing. With respect, everything's changing. So let's not be negative about it. The question for me came, well, what is my role in now looking at this relationship that I have right now with you. How can I still maintain a relationship? And I'm back to South Africa way too often, way too bad at carbon footprint right now. I talk about ethics and issues, but it's an important relationship that I think we do need to foster. Is we have such a valuable, intense knowledge and ability in South Africa that became so clear to me the other day when 2 days ago, when we had this 30-year celebration at the World Museum of Nelson Mandela's release and democracy. And there were a lot of critical questions. And it was led by the anti-apartheid movement in Austria that was reflecting on the impact that they had locally, not in South Africa, but what it meant to have had the anti-apartheid movement here in terms of the current issues around right-wing, etc., and what it means to think about in contemporary times. And I realized that we have way more than we give ourselves credit for in terms of skills, knowledge, remapping, rethinking who we are. And personally, I think we need to find a way of showing that. And I'm still in the process of trying to understand how to represent that on another scale in Europe, because Europe essentially becomes the controller of things with a long arm, even all the way across the continent, South Africa, and moving pieces around in some perverse way. And I'm saying, well, maybe from the inside, I can start to change some of that by celebrating new values, or by instilling new value systems that might work. Coming back to that diagram that I showed earlier, and saying, well, we actually have something more to offer than just pretty pictures of or complex pictures of our way we're responding to whatever crises you think we have. We actually have humanitarian issues that are as important in the world in terms of a non art object basis. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. It's just quite difficult to articulate, but anyway. So one of the things that was very funny for me was, because I moved to Austria and I've done a lot of subsequent trips back and forth, and I'm trying to work with the Austrian embassy on doing some projects, a few of which are dotted across the screen here, but I'm not going to bother going there right now. The one that was quite particular and peculiar, and I realized maybe we do have a voice on another level. I'm trying to figure this out. This was in December, so it's quite fresh for me to still make sense of, is I was invited to an event where this is some back-end footage of just the making of and the thinking of, at the Austrian embassy in Pretoria, the Austrian Minister of Foreign Affairs was coming to meet with the ministers in South Africa to start what they call like an Austria Culture Forum, which is basically like a Goethe Institute mini version or something like that, like a cultural institute for the Austrians in the space. And the ambassador phoned me and says, "Oh, you exist between these two worlds of Austria and South Africa. Please come up with something, because actually we'd like to illustrate somehow this complexity, but we don't know how or what to do." And so my objective was with Mika Manganya, Ngolisile Bongwana, and Zivanai Matangi, who's a photographer that took all of these photographs, Zivanai, to create a journey. And Chiara Struick was in the process of assisting us with the whole thing. And the journey was that let's redraw a map based on the sound interaction that the three of us have, a map that was drawn for us. So it's not to say it's only a colonial map. I think anywhere in the world you go to, a map exists before you even get there, before you're even born. And so say these are the existing maps that exist around us before we even established. And we decided to start drawing this map just before the guests arrived, and we got completely immersed while music was being played and they directed me what to do. I was sitting and drawing. That's my medium. Their medium was sound. And so it was this interesting interaction between direction and drawing and responding and getting messy and everything else that was happening. And you can see the audience arriving, all very perplexed and concerned and interested and whatever they were. And eventually, once they decided that I was done, we stopped. And I stepped back and I bumped into our Minister of Arts and Culture of South Africa and had to explain to him what I was doing. And the Foreign Minister of Austria walked straight up to us and said, "This is the moment where art can do that which us politicians struggle to do." And that was kind of quite interesting for me, that he acknowledged something. And then we spoke about what that is. And it was a really interesting conversation around their acknowledgement that and they didn't say it word for word, but I can see the tension in the air was a lot to do with, the opposing positions around Palestine, Israel at the time, the complexity of what it means to try and work together as two countries that have got so many challenges at the same time, and to have to sign this treaty while we as artists were exploring new ways of working. So what happens here is Ngoli takes the map, rips it to shreds in his performance. Mika, and while he's projected on the top, Mika calls him. Ngoli and Mika have a communication through sound, and I'm busy drawing the map again digitally. You can see me drawing on the iPad and then tearing it apart as kind of an animation of that. And as they're playing, I then go and I start collecting the pieces of map that the trail of map that Ngoli left on the way. And the gesture right at the end is that everyone gets to take a piece of the map home with them. Now, obviously, the ministers quickly came running up saying we want the first choice, but everyone now that was in that audience, the 80-odd people, have a map with them. And why I showed this at the event 2 nights ago at the Weltmuseum, because funny enough, in the audience were about 5 Austrians that had been at the event that are now have these works hanging on the wall and wanted to understand, or came to the talk, and I showed them this, and then I gave, there was an exchange, and it was about trying to build that network. And look, it's a very simple project. It's by no means a super critical one. It's by no means one that I would put as the most aggressive of campaigns. But what it was for me, it was a really interestingly orchestrated intervention into a political moment that didn't try to spit in the politicians' faces, but rather asked them to relook our role as artists in remapping that which they're doing. And the feedback I got afterwards is what I wanted to really share with you, is that it was the icebreaker in alleviating some of the tensions and complexities that had been following them around the whole day. It was that kind of loosening up of or maybe loosening up is maybe the wrong word, but the lubrication, I guess, of the conversation to say there is something else that we're dealing with. It's something else that we all have adopted. Yes, we can blame colonial history. Yes, we can blame apartheid. Yes, we can blame so many things. We can blame economic oppression. But the 2 people, well, the 3 of us, because we were talking, the 3 of us, actually started to understand that there was another layer of human interaction, and that kind of new ecosystem that existed just between the 3 of us. Forget the countries, forget the politics. Was a really beautiful moment to understand that also politicians are just human, and I needed to hear that, and I don't know. I somehow feel there's something in this. I'm still trying to make sense of it. As I said, it's a very fresh work for me to see how it can become something beyond what it was, maybe something more can come of it. So, wow, that was quite a journey to go on. I did promise to show you 1 or 2 personal things that are maybe a bit more connected, but maybe a sense of life from the other side might help to know if I've still got an audience.
Hi, yeah, the numbers have dwindled a bit, but there's still quite a substantial group of people here. This is so wonderful. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, wait, there was one question. I'm not sure if Antonia's still in the room. She sent it a while ago. In terms of tasting the pickle, is it common for people to fight? Is it? God, I must scroll here. Fight the history behind events like what is happening in Ukraine and the Middle East. Antonia, are you still on the line? Are you still with us? Could you just re-ask that question, because I don't think I fully understand it.
Okay, Shema, I don't think I phrased it well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I had this question on my mind because last night I went to a talk by Monica Grütters. So she's like she used to be the Minister of Culture for Germany. It was a culture. And she spoke about how younger people don't understand the history behind wars and events like in Ukraine. Like, it's not just something that popped up. It's like been spanning over like years, like everywhere. Like Ukraine is just an example because we were talking about like Nazi Germany and whatever. But do you think that like people should like look more into the background of something that they're trying to fight for before actually like interacting with it?
Well, the answer is, if you want to make an informed decision about anything, you should inform yourself first. I mean, it depends how deep and I guess committed you want to be to a process. I would say that if I would be very careful, or I try to be very careful to make any sweeping remarks about something that I haven't researched, simply because I wouldn't want someone to, for example, look at my work and go, oh, it's about that, without have actually looked into it either. Now, that's obviously the problem. Everything that we touch has got such a long history into it that it's almost impossible to deal with all of it. There's just way too much information. You've got an information overload. So it's obviously, then you go to Wikipedia and you hope that that tells you the truth, and you go, well, actually, there's a whole nother slant to that. So I would say 100%. I don't think you can actually, or you can obviously, but I think it's very dangerous to make assumptions on situations that are ill-informed, unless you're acknowledging being ill-informed. So I find it quite interesting to sometimes have conversations about being ill-informed, feel vulnerable enough to be able to say, you know what, I know nothing about it, but my gut right now, in response to this, and this, tells me that I feel this way. I'm happy to change my mind. I'm happy to go in another direction, but right now, this is what I'm navigating. So let's be honest about doing the research, searching through it, and then acknowledging that path, because 99% of the time, the information I'm getting and the information you're getting, just alone by being in Vienna and Johannesburg about the war, is completely different. And so where do you start doing that research, and how far back do you go? What kind of information do you use, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that the worst way to be, and this is where we're in this complex world at the moment, we are being pushed to be binary. This is a really interesting observation I've made generally, even at a dinner table. Drop a very complex point on a table. Most people at the table will take either that side or that side. Very few people will navigate the space in between and say, okay, it's not fence sitting. It's trying to make sense of not being binary, trying to say that maybe the world doesn't exist in black and white, or good and bad, or Ukraine, Russia, or what do I know, sour and sweet. You know, maybe there is the reality that we know generally in our own little worlds, that we sometimes have to exist in the space in between in order to survive, in order to do things, you know, and to be fundamental about anything, in my opinion, without being completely informed to the level that probably very few people in the world can be informed about, is problematic. But that's my personal opinion. But I have noticed that even in a lot of the engagement projects, like working, for example, with a group of artists here in Vienna, and having a discussion about very basic things, has very often resulted in this tug of war between two sides. And I find it really an interesting metaphor to think about that rope that's being pulled from two sides, when there's so much of that rope in between that can be turned into all kinds of cool knots that you know we're always opposed against each other. And I'm wondering if that's the media. I'm wondering if that's our world of social thing, where you like or dislike something. You know, we're very stumped in our way that we take in information and make it either good or bad, or right or wrong. And I think this is my question around how you're being informed and what you do with that information. I think very often we get lost in having to take a side simply because we have peer pressure, or because that's all we're getting told about, depending on what our latest algorithm is that someone has put on us, you know, or the circle of people that you're with, if you're not online but in the real world. And I find it quite a traumatic space to be in, to be pulled between the two things, when actually I'm interested in pursuing the research. So I think what I've kind of gained from a lot of the processes to date is that you can only speak from the lived experience, in my opinion. You speak from your experience, you speak from the empathy that you try to have with others and try to relay their experience. You can't speak on behalf of someone else ever on any occasion because they have that lived experience, but you can attempt to represent them as well as possible in relation to your lived experience. And I think that as artists, we sometimes need to take the plunge and say, actually, we need to provoke in order to change something. We need to actually take quite a hard stand and be quite aggressive. All the stuff I've shown you today is very soft. Might be worth another time. I still think we're going to run out of time soon. So I think there's some very hard projects where we've done very blatant, as artists, very kind of aggressive statements about who we are and what we're doing and why we're that, and relating to things that aren't necessarily about engagement and industry building, but actually provocation. That's why the piece in December was very gentle and was very friendly and was very all-encompassing, and that was my choice because I'm actually wanting to foster the relationship between and dialogue between Austria and South Africa. So it's in my interest to work in that way. But you know, you come close to harming my daughter or whatever, and it's using that very close to me. You know, I will cut a head off. You know, there's no question about these things. So I think it also depends on how affected you are by the conditions that are around you, and how you can manipulate those that you want to get onto your side in a positive way. And sometimes it takes a hard line, and sometimes it takes being democratic. And the information behind it will tell you how to act. So the worst thing is going into a situation, not knowing anything, and either you admit it, and that gives you power by being vulnerable and saying, I don't know, please teach me, great. Or you go in there ill-informed and you actually do something that you don't have the confidence to do because you haven't been informed. And in that case, I would say it's critical to have as much information as you can. But as I said before, you can never get all the information. You know, rather make a statement about being ill-informed and about how the information that you get is tainted than pretending that the information that you're getting is the truth. Because I think very often we get information that is mediated and spun for us, especially in today's algorithmic times. It's incredibly scary how quick that happens. And I'm not only talking about the device. Sitting in a doctor's room and listening to conversations around of what people are thinking and talking about, and you leave the doctor's room and you suddenly start questioning yourself when you fundamentally disagreed with it before, but you were just sitting listening to a bunch of other people, and suddenly you realize they are just as much as the social media app that I spin through, because they build on some kind of adrenaline of fear or anxiety or hope or whatever it is, and it's a difficult space to navigate. Again, I think it's a power that we have, that we learn how to navigate it, and that we can honestly say, I want to navigate it. I think as artists, we actually have got the tools. Funny that the picture that's on the screen is a radio conversation with Pala. He's right next to me, talking about tools and technology. I hope that answered the question. Sorry, it was a very long answer, but I'm also thinking about the answer as I'm talking to you. So, yeah.
It was a wonderful answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, I'm happy to take more questions or say more things, but I'm also happy to show you a few more things. I said we've got until 5. I do need to cut off at 5. I don't know how everyone else is feeling. So you still have me for half an hour. If Tracy, if you've got a few comments you want to make, or if you want me to show you a few personal vulnerable moments, by all means, let me know.
I'm good. I think the personal vulnerable moments would be, and I'm just
juxtaposition.
checking to see. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah.
I have a question. Did you hear the sound when it was playing in the videos?
I didn't hear it. I didn't know. Did anybody else hear it?
No.
I was just hearing you mainly. The initially, when you turned down the sound, there was sound.
Okay.
And you said it was too loud, and then you turned down the volume. So
and then it disappeared. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let me. So I'm going to show you something. Just let me know if you're hearing any sound, because I think this piece requires sound. So what I'd like to show you in context of all of these complex, socially engaged industry development conversations. As I said, I'm not showing you any of the hardcore stuff, because that's whatever that we can. It's another session where we're provoking. This is more about building and using provocation to lead to building. But while it's all happening, obviously we go through our own what would you call it? Crisis again. Our own search, our own complexity, our own misunderstandings with oneself. And I've got a piece that I've been showing here and there a little bit, just not an artwork as an exhibition piece, but a process that I went through. I, for the last 10 years, opened my studio up to people coming in and having dialogues with me in various ways. And just like here, for example, in the picture with Pala, it's kind of part of a journey I went through. Just to gather my thoughts for a second, sorry. There are some works that we make as artists that I don't know how to categorize them, because they exist on a completely different plane of emotional intensity and finding oneself where you just don't give a shit about anything or anyone. You just need to make the work, and you need to just connect with someone on a certain basis. And my passion has been drawing forever. I didn't show you many drawings now, but I draw every day. I see drawing as my meditation tool. I see drawing as my kind of a journey in documenting my own ways. And they could be transient drawings, or they can be permanent things. It doesn't really matter. And I often look at other performance style or other art making processes, and I'm almost jealous. I'm jealous of the voices. I'm jealous of the body. I'm jealous of people being able to express in forms that are expressive and in a completely different way. And similarly, I try to make sense of who I am all the time in terms of, as I said before, kind of where do I position myself and what is that dialogue. And so in and amongst all of this work I'm doing, I come across people that completely touch me in different ways that I've never realized was possible. And one of these people I saw in a performance at the Center for a Less Good Idea about 6 years ago, Molisile Bongwana. It was actually longer, 7 years ago, whatever. Anyway, he's a young also performer, incredible voice, incredible dancer, incredible musician. And he's so the antithesis to me, clunky white marshmallow, in relation to him physically, but also, I guess, in terms of context and relatability. And yet I watched him on the stage dancing with another performer. He was wrapped around another performer's body, almost screaming in agony on trying to connect to this other person. And it was just after I lost my father, and my father was an artist, and he left me his whole studio, and I've been trying to process a lot of this material. He was never famous in any way, so it doesn't have any value, but I kind of suddenly had this identity crisis of, why do I even make art in relation to these bigger questions of how I feel and who I am. And so in and amongst trying to make industry and build things and try things, I wanted to show you this, because this is where you're shaped. I think it's in the studio, it's in the making, it's in the dialogue where you form your opinion, you form your sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but I think you understand what I mean. You touch on something that you cannot express in any other form but the way that you do it in that moment. There's no formula or no graph that can help you do that. And we must never lose that and forget that. So I want to show you this vulnerable moment, because it's the moment that's given me so much agency and understanding of my own practice since. And I've been more and more exploring this way of working subsequently, and inviting people to explore with me. So what it is me inviting Molly into the studio without having too much of a conversation. He just brought whatever he wanted along. I said, let's have a dialogue between a screen. So I put up this big screen that you see on there at the moment. And I said, I'd like to try and capture your movement. I'd like to try and hold on to that which I cannot hold on to. I'd like to try the absurd of merging or connecting to you in some way. Just a quick comment. Is this full screen when I press play? Can you also see this? Because I think that's what we'll do there.
Yeah, I mean, when you say full screen, I mean, you in the corner.
Yeah, but the screen is on. Yeah, I'll make
Yes,
myself
the screen is
small.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, there.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's just see if you hear the sound. Yes?
No sound yet, no.
Okay, sorry, I do, it doesn't work without sound, obviously. So let me just try this again.
Oh, you know what? I think if you turn off your video, just try it. Try play it without your. If you turn off.
Okay. Let me turn my video off.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try that. Okay, of course. Yeah, maybe it's. Oh, there, share sound. I found it. There's an actual function that says share sound. I mean, I've done this 1,000 times.
Oh,
sorry. Let me do this again. Okay. But yeah, my video off actually makes sense for this anyway. It's all right. So yeah, so I'm sharing with you a particular vulnerable moment. I will let it play for a bit and then skim a little bit because it's, yeah, anyway. Do you have sound?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. So, as I said before, this piece is one that's it's a complete anomaly in the reality of my making process in this in another sense. It's a conversation piece that's, I mean, even when I watch it now, it hits something quite deep. I'm not as I said, I don't use this as a tool, and for me to suddenly be sucked into this world, I didn't expect to do any of that. It was a complete not only surprise, it was a complete mind shift in terms of what it meant to try and connect to Molly and then him pull me through this. And obviously, I mean, you can, it's all in there. You can talk about my complexity racially in terms of my white outfit and his black outfit. You can talk about all these, what it means, what it could mean, what it represents. But in deep down, it was a really important moment of just sense making in a very abstract way. I cannot put words to it, and this is what's so interesting talking to you about it, is that I'm really, I mean, I've been talking for an hour and almost 2 hours solidly without stopping, and I've been able to articulate, and here I'm stumped, and I'm stumped every time, despite trying to make sense of it for myself. And I think it's these moments that one does for personally that I'm happy to share with you, because I hope you get something from seeing that, in contrast to a lot of this thinking around how do we build and social impact, etc. Is so important that sometimes we just cannot speak about what we do because it's just too deep, or it's just too complex, or it's just too hard, or I just can't research it enough. There's nothing I can do with this other than live it every time I watch it. Obviously, I edited a shorter version for you. It was much longer. I just kind of cut it down, and it was improvised. It wasn't rehearsed. It happened to be like that. It could never be repeated, and I wouldn't ever want to repeat it because I hope I find other forms like this. And there have been moments where I've made something similar, or kind of in terms of an emotional connection, etc. But yeah, I hope it helped seeing another side to this, because I do think 100% that without having these kinds of moments as an artist where you lose yourself in your own search for something, that new things come out of it. If you don't do that, it's very difficult to make sense of the other side. That's just my opinion. I need both sides to exist. Anyway, obviously it's put me in a bit of a space, but by all means, we've got another 15 minutes or so. If anyone wants to chat about anything or pick up on anything or comment on anything, please do. Tracy, I'm sure you've never seen any of that from my side. It's not something that I share. It sits somewhere on a YouTube channel, I think.
While I was watching it, I was thinking about your backstory and how it's like our approach works without knowing the backstory and how to access that. I mean, and then I knowing the the vulnerability and around the passing of your dad in that relation, but not also finding that if I didn't know that, I wouldn't pick it up in the work. And then obviously the very kind of clear lines of the racial by the tonal, or by the just the color choices, the black and white. I mean, those and I was thinking to myself, like, those are such clear tropes, you can't get away from them. And how would you feel about the misinterpretation, or and I like that you're saying that there's these moments where as artists you don't have a justification or some kind of validation for the reasoning behind the impetus to just make, and that's okay. It's almost like the sketch pad, because drawing is such an immediate and vital process, because unlike painting, where you still kind of mixing the paint, and you kind of look in, and with drawing, there's you don't even have to pick your implement up from the surface. So it's an immediate channel between you, that kind of, I think it's like all work is like a spiritual download anyway. It's just sort of, we because of that empathic gene that artists have. I don't know what else to fucking call it. Like we open ourselves up for those downloads. I mean, there's spaces that talk about the Akashic records and the spirit realm, where you kind of like pick all that stuff up. And I'm totally down with all of that, and I'm into everything. I believe everything and nothing. But it's like, and also that kind of that space between the non-binary, how artists should never have to take a fucking position, because we all positions, it's like,
exactly.
we need to be that space that provides the mediation beyond the words, beyond the material, beyond the matter, where actually the gesture suffices. And so I was thinking about like that moment where, because when you use your body as an implement, it's a different download to when you're using the pencil, the draw, because it's so vital, and it's like, how, at what point do you separate that kind of, that fucking energetic fucking power load that causes you to push yourself into these spaces, right? Because sometimes I do a lot of endurance work, so like my body's so fucked. I'm like, I don't even know how I get to the point of even surpassing pain in order to make the gesture that actually makes the work, and then I can say, okay, it's complete now. And then then you completely bug it, like for an extended period of time, because and I feel like that's the space, that neo-shamanistic space that we've forgotten the language for. So, we have these people who and I love going to psychics and sangomas and all that shit. I love, like I said, everything and nothing. And it's like, for me, it's also like to try and figure out like what the script is, because I'm a control freak. I mean, like, like I make such bad life choices sometimes. I'm like, I want to know the fucking script, or even if it's fantasy, I don't fucking care. Just as long as I know that not everything is just like, by chance, or just, like I need to have some semblance of a formula. I need to know the algorithm of my life in some ways, right? So it's like, oh God, I'm talking fucking all over the place. But I was like trying to kind of bring it back to that. Yeah, but like trying to bring it back to that moment of performance when you're making the gesture, and then also when you actually relinquish control. Because I say that with performance work, you can only plan 50% of the work, because the other 50% that completes the work is the unexpected, is whatever is the complete space of vulnerability. It's like, it's like the Marina Abramovich piece where I can never remember the title. The one where she was locked in the room with all these implements on the table, and people could do whatever they wanted, and she just sort of stood and took it. It's like, that point where you plan that 50% that you can plan 100%, and then the other 50% that makes the work, that is, and then obviously you get fucking hooked to the thrill, and that's, I think all performance artists have some kind of death wish and are adrenaline junkies, because it is that 50% that you can't control that is like so exciting. It's like death defying, and it's like, and I love the fact, like, I'm so fucking bad and excited about our constitution. I'm like, the fact that we have this kick-ass fucking constitution that allows for artistic freedom of expression in the manner that it does, the fact that
we must so value that.
Whenever I'm in shit, you say what did you say?
You so value that. We must so value that.
Oh God, man!
It's
the best part of this country. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other good parts too, in spite of all the fuck ups. But like, it's our fuck ups, and we can fix it. And also that's just the other thing about what I really loved about just you going through like all of these. And I that artistic envy, I think, is always healthy, because it's like, oh fuck, I wish I could have done that. I could do that better. And it's like, yeah, of course, that's the fucking gig. Like, do it better. Like there's also the shit that there's biting where you don't fucking reference people. I hate that, because there's all these like fucking people that have like been spawned in the last few years in the art world who they just regurgitating what somebody did last week and what some people were doing in the 60s, only far fucking worse because there's no historical context. And the thing is, like, the point of learning the history is so that you can build on what people have done before, because it just makes the work that much richer and greater and gives you that much more like power, really, you know, because it fucking charges your batteries. So gosh, okay, wait, where am I going with all of this?
Well, you actually asked a very interesting question, and then before you answered your own version of it. But I think it's really good to pick up on how does one feel when the work then gets reinterpreted or misinterpreted or misread. I don't think there's any misreading of the work, you know, or
I agree.
Misread.
Yeah.
I think the way it's read is the way it is. You know, it's read from a perspective. And if I tell you that I came wearing a white overall and he came wearing his black dancing clothes, not because we decided, but because it was that. I happened to have black ink with me because that's what I paint with. And afterwards, obviously, you look at it and you go, oh, wait, black man, white man, screen, pushing, screaming at each other, whatever. You know, and you can read a million things into it. And it is no longer for me to decide. It is now for someone else to take it on. Obviously, I'll defend my personal story, and I want to share my personal story. That's why I'm telling you the story before I show it. But it deeply embedded is exactly that. There's nothing other than that in there. In terms of if you see it purely politically, that's what the work is about. And whether I like it or not is actually no longer up to me. And that's a very strange space to be in. You know,
but also
it's great.
You know, there is the point when but also there's the point when you kind of learn from that moment, right? So you know, the other part is for me, like, because you say like because was this like your first performance, like using yourself and your vulnerability? Was that the first?
Well, with someone else, yes. As in,
okay.
You know,
because I'm just thinking because but I think some of there's like sketch pad moments, because I feel like, you know, there's unplanned, like kind of like, you know, almost like coincidental or synchronous kind of decisions. They're kind of like sketch pad kind of moments, right? Where you just making really intuitive decisions, really. Okay, but there's like the degree of self-criticality, the rigor that is not there. But it can be realized. Like, you might not want to, you know, you might not want to do the work again. But then I'm thinking about, like, for me, the multiple levels. For example, when I've done work like that before, because I've basically been making art on the run, you know, like, you know, and there's like, and sometimes I just don't have the studio. I never had studios for a large portion, but it's like also like I don't have the space, the luxury of space and time, because I'm also feeling like time is running out. I need to make these works, because I really need to have these gestures in place in order to create ripples or moments or markers in the historical timeline, right? And so I go and I revisit them, or I go and I be like really hardcore self-critical. And I was thinking about like where for me the moment, and when I say failed, don't take offense about that.
No.
I'm just talking about in terms of
I
my
consider
kind
failure
of
important.
Cool. My critical kind of reasoning would be, because I'm working on a piece where I'm actually looking at the relationship between Israel and Palestine. I got dragged into some fucking anti-Semitic bullshit in Switzerland recently, because of a petition I signed in 2021, which a lot of people signed, like 16,000 signatures. And I just didn't have the emotional, spiritual, mental capacity to manage all of that. And, you know, and also I just needed to get the fuck home and out of a space that wasn't my country, where I couldn't understand these people's logic that was saying to me the word Holocaust is illegal to apply to anything but the Jewish Holocaust. And I'm like, what about the African Holocaust? What about the Native American Holocaust? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, we've been committing these acts of fucking atrocious genocide, you know, ad nauseum. Like, when the fuck are we going to stop, you know? And how can you implement censorship into art? And so and that's what I'm saying, like, fucking Switzerland, where they're supposed to be neutral, suddenly felt as oppressive as fucking Sharjah, you know, where going in, I knew in Sharjah there were limitations.
So far from neutral.
It was fucking scary, dude.
So far from neutral.
And so anyway, so why am I going off on this whole tangent about this thing? But it was so anyway, so okay, self-criticality, going back to self-criticality and neutrality, and not neutrality, oh, Bad Dad, that was the work I wanted to talk about, because I'm like, at what point can I, because I made a lot of work like in 2005 when I urinated on the dividing wall. I mean, I knew this fucking wall was coming. Any artists are basically seers anyway. We all fucking know the shit was happening. You know, I mean, I was in primary school and reading Nostradamus and waiting for the Antichrist for decades, right? So it's like, you know, the shit is coming. You think art is like this fucking idealistic weapon, you know, that bloodless fucking nuke that will actually ensure that humanity will realize their humaneness and change the fucking like frequency, right? And shift the paradigm. So anyway, so I was thinking about Bad Dad, which is the series I'm working on, because I'm saying like God and Abraham were really shitty fathers, because essentially the one, God sends his son to die for his faulty product, i.e. humans, and then fucking Abraham, like, you know, he has a kid with his slave basically, because his wife arranges it. And then when you know, she's like 900 years old and she gives birth to their first son, she has her first kid. He you know, he wants to like sacrifice his kid to God, who sends out an angel and's like, no, but don't kill your kid. I can see you faithful. You know, you just proved it by almost fucking murdering your own son. Like, don't do that. And I'm just like, how the fuck is this shit actually valid? Like, how the fuck can we endorse the narrative of whatever the fucking mythologies of the crazy shit that goes down in the fucking Bible? Like, God knows, even if it happened or if it was some fucking
and there's more.
You know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck? And we sit and consume it without criticality, and we say
not
this
only that
fucking justifies war and enslavement and like brutality. Like, what the fuck? So I'm like, actually, what we're dealing with is actually the gross fucking imbalance of the masculine. You know, and this is not like a feminist perspective, because I've got a strong masculine energy, but it's like you know, this friend of mine said to me at the beginning of, she's a son, she was saying at the beginning of COVID, she said the COVID has basically been sent to stop us from going into war, because, you know, Trump nuked an Iranian general, not nuked, they drone bombed him at the beginning of 2022, right? And then it was like COVID came, and she was like, well, you know, COVID was being sent because the divine feminine needs to rise, because the masculine hasn't been acting sacred or divine, you know. So this divine energy, feminine energy. And if you look at like the shape of nuclear missiles or weapons are all phallic, you know, everything that skyscrapers are phallic. And so it's just like also ergonomically, you know, how things, and also in terms of language, everything is intrinsically designed to revere the masculine. But also within the masculine, there's a whole range of toxicities, and there's a whole power dynamic and all this other shit. So anyways, I was thinking of like Bad Dad, like while you in your performance,
interesting.
And I was thinking about like how the conversation around masculinity needs to be had, but also I mean, like in that space where, you know, you're both dealing with just the kind of what's it, the monochromacity, the fucking word, I've just made a new word, everybody.
Very nice word.
The monochromacity, yeah, I think so too, of you know, of not just the color, but also the racial, you know, also the conceptual, like how black and white is always,
But I think it's a very important thing to be said, to have said that the vulnerability of the male figure in that often is the thing that strikes me when I'm watching it again, is that there's this push, and yet it's a very gentle push. We're not getting, you know, we're not being male with each other, if you know what I mean. There's a very particular relationship between the two of us that's informed, which is rare. Which is, I mean, I'm a male. I know it's rare, you know, in everyday experiences, and so I think it's a really valuable thing to go through, and to actually question one's own maleness. Forget the black and white right now. It's also got to do with that stereotype that I'm facing. I mean, look at me. I mean, you know, I can't fit more into a cookie cutter than this. You know, it's like, okay, don't have my six pack, but the point is, you know, I walk through Vienna and I look like every other skinhead. You know, it's just a weird space to be in. And you know, it's also about how far do you want to push yourself to feel that vulnerability beyond the studio. So I think you're perfectly right. The idea of doing these things in public is one thing. the reality of doing something like this in the studio and sharing it occasionally with a kind of lump in your throat is another thing. I'm just trying to see if I've got another example here. No, I don't. But the thing that fascinates me, we wear these different hats, and very often we separate them. And what I'm interested in at the moment is where these two worlds collide. So where the performative, and this is very interesting actually. Doing something like that public. This is something I can show very briefly. This is, I don't know if you experienced or saw this. I know a lot of people say they were there at some point. But at the Wits Centenary projection, we did this massive. So I had 100 performers working on this this massive performance at the Wits Centenary celebration 2 years ago. When was it? Whatever. And vocalists and musicians and dancers and performers, and it was all improvised. It was all allowed to happen in pure moment of response. Everything from someone taking the microphone and shouting "Peas must fall" to people literally having fights with each other in a kind of a performative way. And there was something that I noticed that when we allow ourselves as artists to act a certain way, we can infect others to feel a similar thing. So you talking about your way of being. Like Marina Abramovich or whoever else, there's a tendency not of, and I wouldn't say it's a male or female trend or anything like that, but there's an ability to perform an act of vulnerability or present something that should be vulnerable but is actually provocative or offensive or direct or aggressive or whatever it is. Here, a lot of these pictures are very beautiful, so you don't see what's happening in the subtext because at the end it's about also enticing through beauty. But very often the act of doing, I'm trying to see if I've got some other pictures of those, become quite infectious. That the next person takes that energy and passes it on, and I've really realized that working collectively in these performances, or actually inviting others, has given me the power to let go of a lot of these issues that I've got around being public. I don't have examples now here, but a little bit like Molly challenged me. It's almost like if I were to step into one of your performances without, whatever, in response, whether you have the ability to transfer some of that. And I think we have that ability as artists when we really feel and connect with our own medium, that it infects others. And the performance of body, that bodied experience has that power, which is sometimes very frustrating when I do a drawing. I don't have that power because the drawing is still a very distant mediated experience. And so I don't have the feeling that I always infect others with the same kind of need to participate as artists. It's been a really interesting way of moving outside of my discipline of comfort and my zone of comfort, where I can produce by myself in my own space. But then when I bump into someone in another space and suddenly I become someone else because I'm tapping into the energy, it means that other person is doing something right in my mind, and I'm often wondering about how can one take that? Again, coming back to the beginning of this rant of this talk of mine, can one take that and apply it to new ways of giving the artist a platform or a role that sits outside the disciplines that we know, the NAC application forms that have got like 6 or 7 categories that you can fall into, or the museums and the galleries that have their structure. And you go beyond that, you go between that, you mess with that, you play with that, you experiment with that. You, as you said, your studio and your platform deviate depending on where you are and how you do and how you act. And yet I think I'd be interested to see how does one create an infrastructure that allows you to do that, so that your infectious nature can get others to provoke and complexify and intensify certain spaces that need to be looked at in that way. And while I've tried to do that with all the business structures and the finding solutions in the collective space, that's really important. The off spaces and the experimental platforms to give each other space and a boost up, that's all very good. but it doesn't work without the actual art in it. It doesn't work without the provocation. So again, it comes back to the point, you can't be one without the other, or you can't have one without the other. You can decide as an artist, I'm only going to do that, and as a structure builder or industry developer, I can only do that. But you cannot separate the two out. So for you to be able to make, you need the space, and for the space to be able to evolve into new industry and change the status quo of what's being accepted as good art or as acceptable things, we need the provocation. But the two keep on rubbing up against each other, and the one keeps on censoring the other. And that's why I'm saying we're in a space where it's up to the people listening right now, the generation that's actually taking it forward and actually coming out of the institution and saying, well, actually, maybe we need to have a new institution that celebrates that provocation, that takes it on in a completely new way, to say that the canons of art that we know at the moment will continue. They're not going away. They're going to continue. But there is something else in the energy that we've got in the likes of Tracy, in the likes of the activists on the road, in the likes of Marcus and Noli in that moment, in the likes of Mantalo, who's standing in this projection. There are moments where those things are being lost because we have to commodify them to make art that then fits the institution. And yes, we can piss on the institution, I agree, but it doesn't necessarily serve the purpose of building a new way of constructing that parallel world. We need to construct that parallel world at the same time. It's a complex one. I'm not saying we have the answer, but it's nice to see it in the spectrum, and actually, and that's why these graphs for me are important to reflect back on and to understand that I don't exist in a vacuum, but I actually exist in a building block mentality. That something has to grow from here. Anyway, so Tracy, thanks. I mean, I think your reflection on that piece, but also how you brought it back to actually the reason for making. Well, the reason, but the act of making being so important in the embodied way because we need it. And being critical of that which is around it is something that didn't happen with Molly and me. That was more of an escape into a world that I don't know. But take that and apply it in a meaningful way, and something new comes. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Exciting, very exciting.
Thank
you. I've gained a lot from this. Yeah.
Likewise. Did you one of the Great Hall pictures? Did you put an eye, an all-seeing eye?
Where is
did
it?
you?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God!
It's both an eye, but also a cave. So what we end up doing, just as I think there might be a video of it. No, I don't have the video here. But so there's a moment where these performers at the bottom here, which are all Wits students, by the way, that participated, try push each other up the columns, and they kind of try to get to the all-seeing eye and to this opening, this clearing, this other world. And then they start off climbing, and then we've actually got let me see if I've got it. Here we go. And then we've actually got pre-recorded like little animations that we make physically, because it's all live drawing, by the way. This is all me drawing live with a few others. So this is not video in the normal sense of the word. It's actually live drawing. And so suddenly you've got, but these little clips we prepared, and so we're pushing the clips up the column after they left the floor, as if they're trying to get to the top, and then eventually one gets to the top and something happens. So there is this idea of this aspiration to something that doesn't actually make any sense. We were quite critical about a lot of the thinking that's happening. So there's a lot of subtext in this work that evolved from these sessions. That
is fucking insane. I'm so sorry I missed this. I don't know if I was sick or what. That is insane.
It was a 3-hour improvisation session with, I think there were about 10,000 people in the audience. It was that big Wits day with like people climbed on our scaffolding and knocked over the projectors by mistake and whatever. It was like everyone was clamoring to see it. It was a pretty epic experience. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice public statement. Anyway,
cool. Have you got the full 3-hour recording? Did you manage to document?
No, geez. So the big issue is that there's no decent recording of the whole thing. So I've got lots of clips and bits and pieces, but
Yeah.
But the look, I had a certain limited budget, and I couldn't afford to also, because I mean, just the tech alone was insane, and 100 performers, you can imagine. And I actually said to Wits, "Are you documenting it?" They said, "Yes, we're going to stream it." So there's a really bad stream version of it, which is a real pity. But this
is so crazy. They should have asked the film students to do the documentation. I mean, they've got the facility. It's not like you're going to outsource that. You've got like the people there.
It's a classic case of high ambition. Look, it was a great event, and I can't say anything bad about what they actually were able to pull off. I mean, but it was a completely, I think, overpowering experience for most, as in people involved. It was just a bit overwhelming. So I think the documentation. I've got quite a few clips. I mean, we've got our own. Like I asked a few friends to grab a camera and just shoot. So we've got a lot of photo documentation, and I've obviously got a series of video clips as well, but it's not a solid 3-hour journey. Yeah, it's a pity.
Cool. Okay.
Cool. Well,
I'm really sorry I missed it. I thought
well,
it was
let's
going to be like
do it
just
again.
like another.
Let's do it again. Why not? Yeah. There will be more. I thank you. Thanks for inviting me to talk. I hope. I mean, there's still a few people left in the group. I know people also have a life to get to. I actually need to dash off shortly. If there are any other questions or follow-ups or anything like that, I'm happy to give feedback or share something or whatever the case might be. I'll obviously share the recording of this with you, so those that didn't hear it can do that. I might just put it onto my YouTube channel so that they can just watch it there. It might be the easiest.
Cool.
I'll just call it whatever it is, if that's okay. Because circulating a massive file like this is not going to be fun.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. What do I want to ask you? Oh yeah, no, definitely we need more of you. We got to figure out how to make that happen, because this was just been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I hope there was a lot of stuff people to take with them. And it'd be nice to get, I mean, I don't need a critical feedback, but it'd be nice to hear if there's any also issues with what I said. I think it's like the ethics question is a great question. If there are any critical questions, by all means, I don't hide away from these things. I want to hear. I shared one side of my life. There's a whole other side that I didn't share that may be nice one day. And maybe it is in response to some of the questions. But yeah, I'm open to more discussion, and let's see what we can do. So maybe next time in person. Yeah.
Oh, that would be exceptionally wonderful. Oh, that would be so fantastically wonderful. Oh yes, of course. Gosh, dude, you've been so fucking generous. I feel so nourished.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, really. I completely unexpected, like how fucking fantastic this has been. Really super grateful. Thank you so much for your generosity and your time. And this like the depths that you've gone to, and like the expanse as well, is just, it's I feel like, oh God, I feel so healthy. I feel like I've gotten like a renewed fucking like faith in the possibilities of how art can happen again. Like and I was saying that there's a I feel like there's a conspiracy to eradicate like 90s artists and that sensibility, that kind of groundwork. Everybody fucking thinks that that you can be an artist by just having an Instagram account, and there's like the like these sort of this beautiful, like just the tilling of the soil, like that type of foundational work that you've done, that I feel like every student in academia needs to understand, that it's not about just becoming somebody who makes stuff, that couch dressing art, and Instagram art. It's actual physical getting into a space and just being part of fucking life, because that's really all it is, you know. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think it's like, you know, there's that kind of like that depression that sets in when you like probably round about second to third year, like you just fall into a slump because you're like, what the fuck did I just enroll for? This degree is like
I
so
remember that.
pointless.
I think we all
Like,
go through that
yeah,
at some point.
yeah, it's like, just because I can draw, I can't live off this, you know. It's like, unless I get a gallery and that's the only fucking route. And it's like, and then when you know, when you realize that actually absolutely everything in the world is made because of artists, you know, in whatever capacity, whether it's design or, you know, even coming up, you know, I was thinking about the basketball courts that you guys, the one in Nugget Street, that was Trinity
Yes.
session, right? That space has been so, every time my when I was in the 80s, my optometrist used to be across the road from that area. And I mean, 80s was, you know, it was apartheid. It's, you know, now, you know, like, and I remember that space just deteriorating and going past it a few years back and seeing how chock-a-block it is with kids, and how people I know have spoken about playing basketball in that space, and like making friends and moving on, and you know, and how and you know, Europe does it really well. I mean, what I loved about Berlin was that you could, when I had my baby, it was like there was a park, a playground for babies.
Every corner.
There was a playground for toddlers. There was a playground for like tweenies.
But you know,
playground for teenagers.
but you know, the big issue that we're facing, and it's really, really complex, is that we don't have the correct measures in place to show how valuable it really is. So you're saying it now, and I completely agree with you. To have the experience is one thing, but you only have the experience 10 years after it's been done, or 5 years after it's been done, or whatever the case might be. So we always measure all of our doing in these very short frames of time, because that's how the funding agencies and the tick boxing is there. But it's really interesting, and I'm sure you've got the same with your career, that at some point you look back and you go, actually, we made the right decisions at some point not to do that, but to do that. Because that way would have been the instant way, you know, making this and having it happen. But this way actually built a solid foundation of slow change making that I will never see the benefit of. It's like the concept, plant a tree because you'll never sit under it. You know, it's okay. It's okay to do that. And it's okay because then suddenly someone tells you, yeah, no, I sit under those trees every day in the Juta Street or whatever, or it changed my life or whatever. I don't know, whatever little moment happened that I saw this thing and it actually had an impact in my life. And you go, well, maybe I shouldn't be so hard to criticize myself or question myself whether what I'm doing is relevant. Maybe if I just give it time to manifest itself a bit more, and germinate and become something else that I lose control over, then maybe I can start measuring whether what I do is worthwhile, and not sweat the small stuff, not sweat the accusations of being good or bad or ethical or whatever, you know, not sweat. I mean, stay true to it and be as transparent and open about what you're doing so that you can build a solid foundation, because I don't think you can build it on corruption. It doesn't work. We know this. But at the same time, it's about not judging yourself too quickly. And I think that's such a difficult thing to do, because every drawing you make, you look at it and say, is it good? Is it bad? Is it you know, every performance? Did I feel this? Did it work? Did it do? Who looked at me? Where did it go? Where's it going to take me next? Yeah, it's really difficult. And it's only when you can actually step back a little bit, and you can't do that by third year. You know, you can't do that when you've only had so much time. And I have a big issue with the gallery system that picks up students too soon out of the university and says, oh, I'm going to groom you to become the next so-and-so because I like this particular body of work, because I think that body of work needs time to breathe so that it can build up. I'm happy for anyone that gets picked up by a gallery and given money to make art, great. But it's dangerous at the same time, because I do believe that we cannot judge our work immediately. It's a very complex thing to do. And that time-based thinking is a completely an antithesis to the time that we live in, where everything is about the instant, about the immediate, about feeling the success now, about, you know, yeah. And it's interesting for you to say that you see a space like that, and it's a space I've completely forgotten, but then suddenly it does something to actually say, well, maybe I contributed a little bit to a changing life, whoever that is, be it in a gallery, be it in there, be it wherever. But because I gave it time for it to have its own existence, and that's a complex thing to manage if one needs to be on the steroid of what the industry wants it to be. It's a question. Anyway, speaking of which, I would like to carry on this conversation for hours, but I have got some dinner to make for my family, and I still need to go shopping. Those real things in life. And I'm sure a lot of people have had the ears chewed off for long enough. You heard my voice long enough. I offer it again. We can have further conversations. I'm quite happy if it fits into my schedule and there are good questions and there's valuable input. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you so much. If you'll share the recording with me, and I'll pass it on.
It's going to take a while to download, and I'll
compress
it a bit.
No, you said you're going to do it on your YouTube channel, which is
let me just
incredibly
put it
wild.
there.
Yeah, that's going to be super public.
That is very public, yes. No, actually, I can make it unlisted. No, I can make it unlisted so that you can access it with a link, but it doesn't pop up for anyone that searches it. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's yours, so you decide. But this has just been awesome. So cool.
Thank you.
All right.
Really nice.
Look forward to seeing you soon. Thank
Cheers.
you so
Bye,
much,
everyone
darling.
that's still hanging around.
Much appreciated.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Pass my love to Bronwyn.
I will do. Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
All right,
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much,
for joining.
Marcus. Take care of you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Cheers.